this hearing to order. For the record, my name is Kenzie Bach. I'm the District 8 City Councilor and also the Chair of the Boston City Council's Committee on City Services and Innovation Technology, which is holding this hearing today. This public hearing is being recorded and live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-tv. It will be rebroadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and FiOS Channel 964. We will be taking public testimony at the end of this hearing. So if you wish to testify via video conference, if you're watching this from home, please email Cora, C-O-R-A .montrond, M-O-N-T-R-O-N-D at boston.gov to sign up. When you're called, please state your name and affiliation and residence, and limit your comments to no more than 2 minutes, just so we can make sure all comments can be heard. If you're here in the room today, and we are back in the Ionella chamber, and pleased to be so, you can actually sign up over there. You'll see that there's a sign-up sheet, same thing, write down your name and your residence or affiliation, and just make sure that you get a chance to do that either way, online or there a little bit before we start public testimony, just so that we can make sure that we have everybody on the list and we know to come to you. I'm joined here today by my colleagues, Councillor Michael Flaherty, at large, Councillor Liz Braden, District 9, Councillor Frank Baker, District 3, Councillor Aaron Murphy, at large, and Councillor Kendra Lara, District 6. We're starting off hearing from our own Superintendent of Waste Reduction, Brian Coughlin, on the topic, and then we will be moving on after we've talked through Brian and things that we're doing today. We actually will be hearing from the City of Seattle and Hooksett, New Hampshire, for an opportunity to kind of get a sense of how we compare what other folks are doing and what we're doing, and what are the differences and barriers there. The subject of the hearing is Docket 0242, Order for a Hearing Regarding Recycling, Compost, and Waste Services in the City of Boston. And it was sponsored by myself, Councillor Braden, and Councillor Flaherty, and referred to the committee on February 2nd, 2022. And just for folks' reference before we get going, this is really designed as a way to talk about the whole suite of our waste management services, with a particular focus on the sustainable aspect of the portfolio. So, that's everything from recycling, which the city's, the city switched to single stream, and the whole single stream recycling world has experienced some considerable challenges. So we want to talk about that. It's things like, hazardous waste and e-waste, which are a growing part of our portfolio. It's things like composting, which the city has long, aspired to do more on, and has had a number of well, I'll let Brian speak to it more, but we've had some false starts and some sort of half starts, and we're really trying to get into that in a new way coming up. And so, it's the very definition of municipal services. It's what this committee is designed to dig into, and it also, in its own very kind of like unsexy way, is a key part of thinking about what a real climate-ready Boston looks like, and also how we can better serve our constituents. So we have a substantial number of new council members, and there's just been a lot of progress on these fronts and moving pieces, and we haven't had a chance to check in with Public Works for a while. So that's really the kind of catch-all objective of this, and I very much expect that we'll open areas today that will require further follow-up as the session goes on. So without further ado, I do want to pass it over to Brian Coughlin, again, the Superintendent of Waste Reduction for the City of Boston, and let him give an opening statement, and then we'll jump into councilor questions. So, Brian. One sec. Corey, can we just get his mic?
Good. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the council members in attendance today, especially those who sponsored this hearing. Appreciate it. On behalf of my staff at Waste Reduction and Public Works, truly grateful to have this opportunity, especially back in the Ionella chambers. It's great to be here, and it's great to be sharing some of the things that we're doing today and things that we're working on throughout the year and the future things to come. So really appreciate the time. I want to start today's hearing briefly highlighting 3 key points that I think will drive today's conversation and generate more down the line. First, what the city's goal for zero waste means for the residents of the city of Boston. Second, where we stand today in terms of reaching our goal. And lastly, what actions are needed today to ensure that the city's on pace for its 2035 goal of 80% diversion rate, which 80% recycling rate in the city of Boston. The Zero Waste Plan that was launched in 2019 is a roadmap for the future of waste in the city. A future with less trash being generated, more items being reused or recycled, and a future that is full of opportunities for residents across the entire city, regardless of neighborhood. The future of waste in the city is dependent on many things, including the discussion and efforts we take today, the vision for a cleaner and more sustainable city tomorrow, and more importantly, the ability to implement the new vision into reality that not only will steer our city on a path to zero waste, but one that will uplift our communities and support all residents who call Boston home for generations to come. So I mentioned the Zero Waste Plan. I guess we'll probably get into it a little bit, but the 80% diversion rate by 2035 seems like a far away period of time. I just want to briefly go back 13 years to 2009, where the city sat, where we started single stream recycling. The city was basically, from then till now, we've increased our recycling by 97% to over 40,000 tons a year, which is great. So, the diversion rate back then was 13.7%. So if we increase our recycling by that much, you would think that the diversion rate would be a lot higher than it is today. The facts of the matter are the total waste that the city is generating has not moved too much. Although the recycling's gone up, the amount of trash and the amount of material combined that we're throwing away is still relatively high. So the diversion rate's somewhere between 21 and 22%. So for us as a city to move forward and lower that, the amount of trash we're throwing away, we obviously have to keep up with the recycling. But if we continue to do what we're doing today and not make the changes and policies necessary to move the needle, we're going to, even if we saw a 97% increase in recycling now and a 7% decrease in trash like we did 13 years ago, in 2035, we're only going to have a 30% diversion rate. So there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of things that need to be identified and talked about. There's a lot of jobs that could be created. There's a lot of opportunities here for residents of our city. And it all starts with the residents putting stuff at the curb. So the outreach and the education that's necessary for all these programs and the infrastructure that's necessary to help guide us, it's key to this conversation. So I look forward to the questions today from the council. And again, I appreciate the time and allowing us to be here today. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Brian, and I think that's very helpful, and I think just that framing that you gave at the end there, I mean, it's part of the reason that that I think the council has to be seized with this question. Councilor Lara, who's with us, is the chair of the Environment Committee. The city has a number of environmental goals, and I think one of the things that we all worry about is, are we on a plan to get there from here, right? And I think as you just laid out, if we keep doing what we're doing, just, better, but the same, like, we're not going to get there from here in terms of our own goals. And so, and what that means is like real phase shifts that probably involve, budget, whether it's capital expenditures, people, whole new systems in the city. And those are, things that this council needs to concern itself with. So I really appreciate you laying that out there. And I also think that it's important to stress that in seeking for us to do better and reach those phase shifts, it's not a criticism of the work that's been done so far. It's simply kind of recognizing the scale of the challenge we face in terms of dealing with waste in a green way. I wondered if, so I'm gonna set a little timer on myself because I have so many questions that I'm just gonna start with the compost ones and then and I'll let others go. And so just say to colleagues that we will do a few rounds because I imagine that people probably have a couple rounds worth of questions in different areas. So it seems to me when we talk about that, like, the weight and the amount of trash that we're dealing with and how to really get it down, one key thing is composting. And for a while, the city's had Project Oscar, where you've got compost bins at a few locations around the city. But we've talked for a while and chased the mirage of curbside composting, and we've put it in the budget a number of times, and it hasn't really borne fruit. And so I wondered if you could give us an update on where we are with the curbside composting pilot in the city.
Yep, thank you for the question, Councilor. For curbside composting, we issued an RFP A couple of months ago, we got a couple of responses. We are actually in the final process now of finalizing a contract for curbside composting across the city. Without getting into too much detail, it's not publicly released at the moment, but it will be shortly, which is very exciting for all of us, especially the council. I'm sure that's been waiting for something like this for a long time. Some of the reasons why it took so long, and if I can just take a minute, and COVID didn't help things, and I'm not going to blame COVID, but I will say that the original RFPs that we did put out for curbside were kind of, a subsidy of or a discounted program where the resident would have to pay for the services. So, in looking at the numbers and doing all these different, we're doing all these different initiatives. If we want the participation levels to increase in the city, we want people to be happy about participating and actually take pride in what they're doing. We can't put expectations on the resident to have to put forward, a certain dollar amount per month, or charging somebody or taking something away because they're not paying. So this RFP rolled out as a fully funded city program for all residents. That's going to be about, we're going to phase it in 10,000 subscribers for the first year. So without getting into detail on the rollout or the vendor right now, there will be curbside composting in the city of Boston in 2022.
And is that anticipated in terms of a pilot? Are you going to pull those 10,000 subscribers from a particular area of the city, or is it going to be like the first 10,000 people sign up, or how is that likely to work?
It's going to be a citywide first come, first serve rollout. So it's basically going to be, the resident will have to sign up, and there will be like, we're going to know that they're interested. We're going to know that they're committed to doing it. We're not just going to give bins out to every household. As you can, with the recycling, there's a lot of contamination, and quite frankly, it's expensive. If we have to deal with that with the food waste, it's even more expensive. So we want to make sure that everybody that is participating is someone that signed up and is willingly going about this program. They wanted it. So it's, it's going to be an opt-in program, basically. You get an opt-in, sign up online, then you'll get a starter kit, which will be a kitchen bucket, a curbside bin, some bags, and educational flyers, outreach, something like that. So.
And it'll be compatible both with the parts of the city where folks put trash out on the sidewalks and with the parts where folks have bins. Okay.
It'll be across all districts. There'll be no difference in the program.
And do you have a sense? I'll ask this question, and then I'm going to go to colleagues, and I have many more questions come back. But do we have a sense of what will happen to the compost we collect? Like, what's our plan for treating it? Is it going back into like city parks, et cetera? Like, what's the vision for the next?
Yeah. So thanks. The vision for the compost is to continue to contribute to the parks and community gardens, and to, we're going to have a lot more material now. So we're going to actually have to find new uses for this, which is really good to have, other stakeholders in the game that want to really, see the results of the program, come and keep it in the city. We don't want to be hauling stuff outside the city and adding to those costs. So I think that, if we can find stakeholders that need material, whether it's, other non-city community gardens, but other gardens or groups throughout the city, maybe schools or, something else that needs it. I think there's plenty of material to be passed around.
So you anticipate that there will be a piece of this where we need to recruit those sites?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, I'm going to go to colleagues and then come back to myself. So I'll go first to Councilor Flaherty and then to Councilor Braden, and then we'll go around the horn. Oh, and I just want to note also that we were joined by our Council President, Councilor Ed Flynn from District 2. Councilor Flaherty?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for hosting and for also co-sponsoring waste management, recycling, and compost services, our bread and butter issues for municipal governments, and our ability to keep our neighborhoods clean while moving forward to a more sustainable way that we manage this is very important to get right. I also want to recognize our former colleague, Matt O'Malley, for the leadership he's put in the space, frequently reminding us that implementing more environmentally conscious policies and practices also, it's a matter of good finance. And also be remiss if we don't recognize our colleague, City Councilor Frank Baker, who also has led issues on hearings around curbside composting as well. So I'm sure he's excited to hear what you just mentioned, which is compost will be here for approximately 10,000 folks in 2022, so that's great news. How much do we currently spend on trash removal, and how much do we spend on recycle material removal?
Trash collections, just under 30 million per year, 28 plus, and the disposal of trash is roughly 18, 19, plus the recycling's another 3. So we're looking at 22, 23.
And so sort of take the people that are watching at home through this, so trash gets, capital comes in front of my home, they take the household trash, it goes to a facility, I think it's somewhere out of the city boundaries, and then a little later on, another truck comes by and takes the single stream recycling. And want to note, obviously, I led efforts on the council at the time back in 2009 with former colleague Councilor Ross for single stream recycling, as well as the bin distribution and the education piece that went on. And also want to know whether or not it makes some sense to maybe reissue some new bins for folks' bins that have either been dilapidated, cracked, missing wheels, missing covers, etc. And with more blue bins, would we be encouraging more recycling along with the curbside compost bins that the city will hopefully will be distributing as well?
So to answer the question on the replacements, we've actually, this is a 3rd year now, the contract's going to be up in June. The Public Works Department back in 2018, maybe 2019, created a contract for cart delivery replacements for minority-owned businesses only to bid on. And we had 2 bidders that came to us with, a great proposal, and we actually hired both of them. So there's 2 minority companies from the city of Boston, residents, that are they're delivering new bins, swapping out the broken ones. So it's actually been a great program. Took it away from the bigger contract, which was the goal, take something away from the big one and kind of create these smaller contracts. So that's something we're looking at continuing to do, to get all those broken ones, like you said, from 2008, 2009, get those off the street, get somebody, we have new carts that are made with ocean plastic, the first city in the country to use them. It's quite a story, so trying to, connect the dots with that too.
And how do residents access that? So say, for example, I have a smashed up, dilapidated blue bin. Who do I call? How do I get one of those newer bins from one of those companies?
Yeah, you can just call 311. 311 will create a case for you, or they'll transfer you to waste reduction to the operations center, and we'll put you on the list to get swapped out. When we took on these contractors, we had a backlog of almost 1,000 cases. Within a matter of months, everything was caught up. So if you called for a cart today, chances are within a week, maybe 10 days, you'll have a brand new one. So it's really helped the services out also.
It's great to know. And then obviously with the population increase for our city, that in turn, I assume, increased our trash demand, if you will, and/or recycling demand, as well as the construction boom and the remodeling boom. I guess, how are we handling sort of the construction material side of the house?
So construction material, we don't collect curbside, so that's still part of the banned material that has to get collected separately. So you get roll-off trucks, you get a permit, you get your own private hauler. We'll pick up all your curbside household trash. With the increase in population and the construction, we are seeing, like I mentioned in the beginning, that even though we're recycling 97% more, the trash number's still high. So it's, we're not cutting into that recycling rate. We're really just kind of leveling things off. The more buildings, the more trash. And I wish more people would be aware of the trash situation in these buildings before they're built, and they come out to us and ask us what we suggest, and it's almost like start the whole process over because they didn't think about the trash room or the residents recycling, so that needs to be, maybe it doesn't start with Public Works, but somewhere along the lines with, when you're building a new building, they have to keep the trash recycling in mind, what's going to happen at the end of this, because the developer's going to walk away.
Right.
The resident's going to be stuck, the management's going to be stuck with this, with a system, with a trash chute that's elaborate, that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, that doesn't work, and that's highly difficult to maintain. So.
And then just lastly, before I turn over to my colleagues for round one, what is the next hazardous waste date, and how do people get information about that? We get a lot of calls on that this time of year.
So for our first hazardous waste day will be May 21st, and that's going to be at 400 Frontage Road in South Boston, right on the south end kind of border, 4th Street Bridge. We're hosting 5 events this year. 3 of them are at Frontage Road, 2 of them in West Roxbury. So that's the first one. And the messaging, we have new staff that we're really trying to build our team out. So we got an outreach, like a campaign getting ready to go out. We have a zero waste program manager, Teresa Severies and Andrea Scaffo, working on the communications. And, we're really, that's on our radar. We want residents to do things as a city. Every department needs somebody to do something, but we need to get the information out, so.
And the hazardous waste, that drop-off was suspended during COVID, correct?
No,
It was not, all right.
no, we kept going. We had safety protocols in place. We had some events, we had over 1,000 people show up.
Wow.
So as we get further into this discussion today, we have plans to kind of shift how we do things to try to, increase participation, but take away from that, that burdensome line that residents are sitting in, because that's not a healthy event when you have someone that complains because 1,000 people showed up, but it should be a success. To us, that's a success, but to the residents, it's a horrible experience, and I agree. So we're trying to come up with ways to limit those times in line, increase access to programs similar to that, but more often, and not just 5 times a year.
Gotcha. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Councillor Flaherty. Councillor Braden?
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. You mentioned new buildings, and we're seeing a lot of new buildings in my district, and we do have these conversations about waste disposal and drop-off spots for Amazon packages and all. Are you seeing a large increase in that type of waste, like the packaging for Amazon or those, and how are we communicating to developers? Like, are you working with the BPDA to try and flag this up as we need better ways to dispose of our waste in these new buildings, or are we talking about that?
As far as BPDA, no, that's where maybe we can work together on something for the construction part of things. The collection, once a building's up, our service is curbside. You have to have it out by 6 a.m. If that doesn't work for the building, they have all the right that they want to go private, go right ahead, and it doesn't go into our numbers. We're not paying for their trash, they're paying privately. A lot of the newer buildings that don't have great access for trash containers, they will go private because it's just easier for them to have a vendor go in the building, pull it out for them, or just, they can put it out whenever time they want. You know what I mean? It's more of a la carte service, what you're paying for, and where you say, put it at the curb, we'll get it. So, it's something that some of these buildings, a lot of the buildings in Councilor Flaherty's district on the Seaport area will not get city pickup because it doesn't really suit their needs. They need, 5 to 6 pickups a week. Some of these folks that don't have trash rooms in the buildings like that. It'd be great to reach out with BPDA and talk a little bit more about what the actual process is and how we can make it a little more efficient. As far as the Amazon packaging and stuff, there's been quite an uptick. We've been starting to see things come down a little bit, but during the first few months of COVID, the trash was up over 23% citywide. The recycling was up just about the same. That comes at a heavy cost, and the districts were getting picked up. You may have gotten calls that trucks were coming in late, or they weren't getting off the street and stuff like that, but those are the same trucks that were picking up in 2019 and 18, same guys. So it's the people that were picking up the trash that now had to do 25% more work, right? And it took longer to do it, but they got it done. So that's part of the story of what we're talking about today: the collection of trash, where we're bringing it, the distance that we have to go, and just overall, what can we do to make it better as we look forward to what the city looks like as far as trash collection.
And then I was at the farmers market the other morning, and I saw this program that people can bring trash to their food waste to the farmers market. How's that going? And is that like a pilot scheme, or is that something that's
Yeah.
we're pushing it, and people are turning up with their stuff, So
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad to hear it. Yeah, so part of one of our new initiatives is the farmers market food waste drop-off program. So we are partnering with the farmers markets. The first one and the only one at the moment is in Brighton. So we're working with all of the partners in the city that operate the the farmers markets on just even having a farmers market, food waste bin that people can see and ask questions and know that, it's going to be part of this whole outreach campaign that we're working on. So with the help of Teresa and Andrea's great work, I'll give them kudos. It's really a good idea because, the farmers and the people that work there, the people that go there, they're telling people about this.
Yeah.
So it's, you just told all the people in the room about this program, and, they might be interested and tell someone else, and that's how it works, and it didn't cost the city any money to do the advertising. But we're working with the farmers, we're getting some metrics back from them on a weekly basis to see, if it's successful, and it has been thus far for the first round. And they actually take the food waste back with them to their farm. So we're working on ways to help, tell that story, whether it's a digital storytelling or a video or some sort of blog, or, just show people that, from curb to farm and then back to the curb or back to the garden or something, you know what I mean? So just, there's more to people's waste than just, what they see at the curb. There's a lot to talk about.
Very good. Thank you, Brian.
Thanks.
On for that, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Braden. Councillor Baker?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Brian. Thanks for coming out. You talked a little bit about, so the trash to collect is 30 million, then it's 18 million to tip. So per year, we're 48 million in that. Do I have that correct?
Plus recycling, so.
Yes, the recycling we're doing that one next. Recycling is how much? That's just 3 million?
It's roughly, it's to be a little less this year. So as you know, in the past, we've talked recycle costs, and, the market was flipped upside down.
Yeah.
In 2018, and it started to rebound. Last month, we were paying $65 a ton for recycling, and we're paying about 97, 98 for trash. So it's less than trash still.
Yeah.
There were points last year, or in the last couple of years, we were paying over $100 for recycling. So it's reflective of the market and the commodity markets, basically, if you think of.
So what's the actual tonnage for trash and for recycling a year?
Last year, we did about 210,000 tons of trash and about 40,000 tons of recycle.
40,000, okay. So curbside, if we do 10,000 people, what do you expect with 10,000 households? What do you expect to do in tonnage?
That has yet to be determined.
Do you have a ballpark around someplace?
For 10,000, I can get a number.
Yeah,
I'll work on that.
so my question would be, if we're going to collect that curbside, and have we come up with how we're doing that? What's the infrastructure doing that? Like I've been advocating for an organics digester built here. Some of our own would be our infrastructure, because if we had the cost of tipping trash recycling isn't going to ever come down. So we're in a point now that if we built infrastructure around this, then we could build those jobs in. They would be green jobs. So what's the plan now? Curbside compost, come from my house, where does it go now? Like a place like Bootstraps and whatever there?
There's two different models. So it could go to a farm where there would be like put in windrows with yard waste and made into new material. And then there's the core over in Charlestown, which is it creates a slurry that gets fed to the digesters.
So it burns it.
It actually, the energy, I don't want to speak upon the details of the engineering behind it all, but the energy from the food creates the gases that fuel things. So I think your question is more of if we're doing the compost.
Infrastructure, I'm looking for where the infrastructure is. So you just answered in Charlestown, and what's capacity over there? So it turns it into a slurry that turns it into gases that we can capture and move.
Yeah.
So is that our infrastructure? Is that a privately owned?
That's a privately owned company, but as far as the trash goes, like by doing the curbside composting, we're certainly going to take away from some of the trash.
Yeah.
But we're really not going to be eliminating a cost. We're probably going to be adding to a cost because now you have a new service, you have a new vendor, you have a new tip fee. You know what I mean? So.
But what I'm getting at is, are we having any discussions around maybe how we handle that material ourselves? What would that look like?
Yep. No, I
Can
appreciate.
your department maybe fund it in a feasibility study through the city council here? What would it be like to get back some of our infrastructure for the city? Because whether it's the 60s or the 70s, we got rid of all that trash trucks, that all becomes contracts. And I think if we're at a point where we can build something out that can be city infrastructure, so then we aren't at the mercy of the market in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and we're also building and growing jobs that would be good jobs that would sustain families into the future. So maybe my question is, how do we get talks around what are we doing for real infrastructure? Because if that's something we're building out, what are we doing towards the future? It's not just going to be just contracts, because these contracts, what is our trash contract total a year, and then what is our recycling contract a year total? Do you have those numbers? And this isn't a budget hearing, I'm just,
Yeah,
you
I
know,
mean,
trying to put
it's-
into place, so if we're able to divert a quarter of our compost out, and we're handling it all ourselves, creating jobs, creating infrastructure, you know, so what would it take to get us, you guys, talking with us about that actual infrastructure? Would it be a feasibility study?
Actually, I'm glad you brought this up, Counselor, because as of March 14th, there's been an RFP out there that's due back in 2 weeks for the planning and design of a food waste processing site in the city of Boston.
That would be owned by us?
That would be owned by us, probably somewhere down the line, operated privately. Unsure on the details of that, but
Yeah.
it would follow up, the planning phase would be followed up with the construction plan and then an operating plan. So we do have plans in the works on having someone come in and do all like the research with the state,
Yeah.
permitting, site assignments, all that kind of stuff, to see what we're getting involved with. And obviously, you know, we see the writing on the wall with the markets. You know, we see exactly what you're saying, and to that point, we need to act. You know, I don't like using the word crisis, but as we look at the future of trash disposal, you know, it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller with less capacity. So this is why these other programs are really important. But, you know, right now we have a place to bring the trash. It's not anywhere near here, but we get it there. There's going to be a day where there's not going to be a lot of capacity, so we need to find these other programs that are going to help us, you know. But we're on.
Do I still have a minute?
Yep.
Madam Chair? And along those lines, I know when we went to single stream, everybody was excited about it, but it seems like that might be part of our problem now. Is it almost time to get back to go back to what Liz was saying, just cardboard, just glass, just metals? Do we have to go back to that because people or countries aren't buying our recycling anymore, from what I've been told, from what I've heard? Is that true?
That is true, but what I would say to that is that's a good reason to get some domestic markets back online.
Yeah.
You know, if the foreign markets aren't doing well, there's no reason why the infrastructure cannot exist on the East Coast or somewhere in the States. You know, we're at the beck and call of these billionaire companies that are overseas kind of dictating things when we can have a say in how things go.
Yeah.
So even more of a proponent why we
Should we be looking at separating out our recycling again?
honestly, single stream doubled the amount that we can put in the cart. If you wanted to go backwards, now we have to add another cart to every household. We also have to add equipment and personnel. So you have to have, right now, all of the trucks throw it all in the same truck,
Yeah.
right? It's recycling.
But then in the separation there, don't we lose efficiencies there and contaminated loads and that sort of stuff?
So we don't get charged for the contaminated loads with our contract, but that's likely to change in the future. But the facilities that sort this stuff out, you know, they're really pretty elaborate systems that are continuing to, get retrofitted for different types of materials and just new ways to doing things. So, I mean, once we dump it on the ground, it's up to them to sort it. And it's worth it for them to get all of the material together and all the bottles, everything separated out.
Yeah.
Because there's a value to it. So it's worth it for them to do that. It's just how do we get that, how do they get it really sorted out quicker?
And then my last thing was if you can just give me what we pay in total collection and tipping for the trash and collection and tipping for for the recycling, if I can get the numbers on those, and I think that's about it. Oh, and just keep us up to speed through the chair on that RFP so we can advocate for or, you know, help to locate those sorts of things. Because if it's done on city land, city resources, I think we need to own it, and I think we should be operating. I don't think we should be going out to a contract, but that's just my sense. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Baker.
Thank you.
And I agree. I think that's something that we may want to follow up on with a dedicated hearing, because I think there's a number of us who think there's an opportunity here to grow a city-based program. Councilor Murphy?
Thank you. Thank you to my colleagues for holding this hearing. And also, I was fortunate to speak with your office a couple months ago. It was the first city department I met with as I was going around introducing myself. And at that meeting, I shared my own personal experience. I live on a street with several apartment buildings, and there is always that concern the night before where they put out like a pile of white trash bag trash, and that always causes health and rodent issues. So something we talked about that day. Also, I'm glad to hear that there's the topic here in the greater education, and I'm happy to hear that this is going to be a priority, because my fear has always been that when residents are confused about what to do, they often just put it all in the garbage can and just put it out to the street. If it's paint, if it's batteries, if it's compost. And lastly, the Project Oscar is exciting to me. I'm old enough to remember, and my mom's backyard still has where you would step down and you would put the garbage in the ground and lift up. I don't know, are you old enough to remember that? Where you'd separate after dinner and you'd take out the garbage to put out. The trash would go into the barrel, but you would bring the garbage outside. So composting is wonderful that that's something up and coming. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Murphy.
Thank you.
I'm going to go down to Councilor Lara.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you so much, Brian, for coming and sharing. And sharing with us the work that you're doing. I'm a newly elected city councilor, and it is always amazing to me to hear all the intricacies about how our city processes function and this amazing level of work that you're doing, so thank you. As Councilor Bach mentioned, I am the chair of the Environmental Justice and Parks Committee here on the City Council, and so I'm excited to be working together sooner than later. And I'm also the chair of the Housing and Community Development, and so this conversation about who we include in the process when we're deciding how to build is a ripe conversation, and you're not the only city entity or otherwise who is having conversations about being included in the development conversation from the beginning. We hear it a lot from the unions who are going to be building the buildings. We hear it a lot, and so this is interesting for me. So I think when it comes to, I'm excited about the composting program. My question around the composting is there any opportunity to make the 10,000, right? We have 10,000 slots to make, to basically make decisions about, instead of having it first come, first serve, is there still any opportunity to think about, the neighborhoods where we get the most trash from, or the neighborhoods with the highest needs? I don't want to lose an opportunity, because I think that particularly around composting, there's a lot of education that needs to happen. So I don't want to kind of skew it in one way where we are like, oh, we get more trash from this neighborhood, but in that neighborhood also the majority of the people don't understand composting and so won't use it, right? Like, we don't want to lose out on those spots in that sense. But is there still an opportunity to kind of make a decision around where we split those 10,000 memberships?
Absolutely, and it's a great question, and I appreciate it. That was actually one of the biggest things that we were thinking about when we were talking about the rollout internally. How do we want everybody to compost.
Yep.
Don't get me wrong. But the person that doesn't know anything about compost is the person that we want the most. Right? We want to get into the neighborhoods, we want to educate people. We want to be the people that, we're getting results based off the outreach that we're working on and knowing that it's working, getting into the communities on a one-on-one basis, getting back to civic meetings, going to coffee hours and open houses, talking to the residents, right? So we do have a plan actually to work with EJ Communities on, I say first come, first serve, but it's, we're going to spend some time on how do we really get into those specific neighborhoods you're talking about. And we're coming up with a way to do that now, so that we're ready by July, August to start. So you'll be hearing from us relatively soon, and it's an exciting time for Public Works to really do this work. There's a lot to do, and I'm sure there's a lot of advocates in all the neighborhoods citywide that would love to step up and help get these messages across and help us out.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
looking forward to it.
It sounds like there's an intention to just kick up the community engagement piece of it and the education piece of it, which is really exciting for me, and I'm really happy to hear that, so thank you so much. So at the beginning, when you were sharing your opening statements, you made a mention, you said, you know, if we don't implement these policies, right, and if we keep going in the way that we're going, we're gonna see a problem. And so what policies would meet these needs? You know, just this, I know this is kind of zooming out a little bit more, but as, you know, as the chair of the Environmental Justice Committee, I'm excited about, you know, finding parks and community gardens who will use the compost. And so how can we be helpful? What do you think is some of the more necessary policy-specific work that needs to happen on the city council?
Thank you for the question, but to be honest, and to keep things pretty broad as far as what we're looking for, you know, there needs to be a way to limit what we're doing on the street. I think we need to work on some regulations. We need to work on some policies when it comes to big buildings, apartment buildings. You know, I'm a believer that, you know, if you live in a building that's over 15, 20 units, chances are it's not owner occupied, and it's probably owned by, you know, a business. So as far as the council is concerned, you know, I would hope that some of you would agree with me when I say that. And, you know, these businesses are overseas or wherever they are, but the residents aren't being taken care of well. But the trash is being put out with the regular trash that goes with your single family or 3 family or whatever it is under 6 units. You know, it's all part of the same trash problem that we have as far as picking it up. You know, so working in a working session or something as far as development and capping the amount of units that we're picking up with the residential program, or having some sort of, you know, the discussion can go a lot of different ways. But I think, you know, the larger buildings, especially in Councilor Flynn's district, downtown Crossing, you know, we pick up buildings with 400 or 500 units twice a week or once a week, depending on where they are. You know, there just needs to be just to have it looked at anyways. You know, I think that would be helpful. We have a big building recycling ordinance, so anybody over 7 or more apartments has to recycle by ordinance. But they'll put out 1 recycle bin, and they'll be compliant because they recycle. But that's not driving moving the needle at all. You know, that's creating a burden for us where we have to continue to go there and pick up trash off the ground, and 1 recycle bin later on. It's not helpful. So there's a lot of things that could be done in addition to that.
Yeah.
You know, and kind of caught me off guard with that. Good question. But,
Please.
you know, we'd love to talk more about it, because I think there's a lot that can be done to really move in the right direction as a city.
Yeah, no, I live in one of those buildings that has 200 units in it in my district, and so I want to say that the inconvenience is also passed on to the people who live there. There's always a problem with getting the trash and the recycling, whether it's a chute or getting it out and all that. So let me see if I have another question. I think, you know, about the policies, the composting, the 10,000. So I share Councilor Baker's excitement around bringing things in-house, and I'm really excited about exploring what that looks like. So I think, not a question, but maybe a request, if we could, if my office and our committee could just see the RFP for the planning and design for the waste management, and I would love to be in conversation around that. I think that we have a really unique opportunity, and Councilor Bach and I have also kind of had this conversation where there's a lot of state and federal funding that's coming in, that's kind of like because of COVID, like a one-time influx, and I think that there's a opportunity that we don't want to miss there to build this infrastructure internally, build green union jobs for the people here, particularly as we're kind of recovering from the economic hit from COVID. And so I would love to be involved in that process, however closely works for you and your office.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. No further questions, Jim.
Great, thank you so much, Councilor Lara. And yes, we'll get that RFP from you all for the whole council, that'd be great. President Flynn?
Thank you, Councilor Bach, and thank you to the sponsors for calling this hearing order, and also want to acknowledge that Councilor Flaherty and Councilor Bach and Braden that have done tremendous work on this issue in the past. I've worked closely with them on trash pickup, on pest control related issues. Just last Friday, I was with Brian and some city officials and South End residents in the South End, I guess it was Friday morning, talking to residents about this subject, about trash pickup in the South End and pest control, a huge issue in the city that's only getting worse. So I just want to say thank you to Brian and the Public Works team for what they're doing, and for my colleagues for their important work too. My big concern and big challenge as we go forward is, different neighborhoods need different assistance. What happens in the South End might be different from West Roxbury. It might be different from the Fenway area. The South End is struggling right now, as you know, with trash pickup, with pest control, with rodent situation. But a lot of the homes don't have the physical opportunity to store barrels, and there's no place to store them in the yard. So public education awareness campaign is critical. And what also is critical is educating our immigrant neighbors as well about the important role of trash pickup. And it takes time, but we need to engage everybody about educating people about how you physically take out your trash, how you physically recycle, and then going into composting. It's not as simple as just saying, take your trash out. So I think we can do a better job on public awareness campaign, public education campaign, including this body, including me. Also, I can do a better job of educating the public. As we go forward during this budget process, I think it's critical that we call for more funding for these types of issues. These quality of life issues are critical to the residents. If we don't get trash pickup right, if we don't get composting pickup right, if we don't get recycling done right, and pest control and illegal dumping, the impact it has on public safety, public health, people will leave the city if we can't address these problems. So I think we have to make significant investments in the city budget on these issues. I think it's that critical. So I guess I should ask a question. I don't mean to dominate the conversation, but when you bring this new plan forward, how are you going to ensure residents know about it? What public education are you going to provide that's going to be different from the past, so we're actually going to reach people that need to know about the program?
Yep. So thanks for the question, President Flynn. I appreciate it. So as I mentioned earlier, we're building out the zero waste team within Public Works. We're adding staff that can actually reach out to people and meet with people, and it's not asking me or my assistant to go to meetings and help spread the word. We're actually going to dedicate staff for that. We're going to be reaching out to all of the council's liaisons and ONS members, really putting a lot of extra effort into this because we know how critical it is. You mentioned Immigrant Communities. We actually have for next year's budget something along the lines of what you're asking for already in there. So when you guys are looking at the budget, thinking about, how do you educate members of the community who don't understand English, and how do you just expect them to know what to do? Well, we don't. We want them to know how to do things the right way, but we also know that it's going to take some time and some education so that they know we're behind them, teaching them. We don't just hand them a pamphlet and say, good luck. And that's kind of why we want the curbside program to be more of an opt-in program, so we already have that buy-in from the resident, and we're not just saying, good luck with it, and then walking away as a city. You know, we have to be with them the whole time. So the education piece is really important to me and my team. So I'm glad you asked that question, but we do have plans to really amplify what we're doing, and more than just the print media or our social media. You're going to be seeing a lot of the Public Works Department. You'll be hearing a lot about zero waste in the city of Boston. You know, people don't even know what it means yet, and you know, that's our goal, to get everybody to know what it means. So looking forward to it.
Thank you, Brian. And one follow-up question. So I'm still struggling with what's happening in the south end, where residents are having a tough time putting their trash out, putting their recycling out at certain times, and then you know, being impacted by the rodent-related issues. So we still haven't figured that aspect out yet. And as I mentioned, the south end, a lot of the residents can't put their barrels in the yard or in the alleyway. And then we're going to add another composting to it. So I want us to make sure that, you know, we're clear to residents on exactly what their role is during this process, because it's not as simple as just, as I mentioned, putting your trash out. We were trying to figure out what we're going to do on pest control. That's going to be the first hearing I'm going to call this year, is again calling on more resources and funding for pest control for the city of Boston. That's going to be my first public hearing. But I still think we need more work on educating residents on basic trash takeout and recycling, and providing them with resources to do it. So that's a priority for me. And then lastly, I also agree with Councilor Baker, Councilor Lara, but I think, you know, we need to keep a lot of this in-house, a lot of this work in-house. And I know our city workers are capable of doing this type of work, and I'd rather see that than contracting a lot of these services out. So that's all I have for now, Brian.
Thank you very much, Councilor. I agree that, you know, every district's different, and we acknowledge that, and we work with the districts on, you know, the ways that are going to help them get their problems resolved. So I'm looking forward to that challenge that we have in the south end, and working to resolve that with you going forward.
Yeah, and in my final comment, in district councilors know their district probably better than anyone. So when you have that public education awareness campaign, please include district councilors in that discussion at the very, very beginning, so that they're on board. They can give you exactly what needs to be done and what not needs to be done to be effective. So I encourage you to make sure district councilors are involved at the very beginning and not at the middle of the process.
Excellent. Will do. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Councilor Bach.
Thank you so much, President Flynn. I have some quick second round questions, and I will run around to second rounds, so if folks have those. And you were just speaking about the language access point. I think that is going to be important, especially in you know, we found with the city with some of our first come, first serve programs in COVID, it's important that kind of like before signups are live, that information is available in all languages. We've thought about how we're pushing it out, or else we can end up in a situation where we're still translating documents, and meanwhile, like English language and savvy folks are signing up for something first.
Yeah, we're working on ways to translate everything prior to the English language getting printed, and whether that's online with a QR code that'll link to everything, so everybody has everything at the same time.
Great. And just circling back a little bit on the question about where the compost goes. So is the second thing, so I guess I'm trying to understand, so there's a use of the compost where we put it back into parks, gardens, maybe our schools, et cetera. And then there's like, do we currently do with Project Oscar, or are we considering like a biofuel type? Like, I'm trying to understand if that's also.
Yeah, so Project Oscar is currently collected by Black Earth Compost. They're out of the North Shore, Ipswich, I believe. So they collect and bring back to their farm everything that they can, and that's composted naturally with the windrows that they have. When they come across a lot of contamination, which does happen in Project Oscar, because it's not really monitored, then they'll bring that to Charlestown where it can actually depackage any of the contamination that's in it.
And the Charlestown facility is producing a form of biofuel.
It's producing a slurry it's an engineered biosolid that's it's tanked currently up to the Greater Lawrence treatment plant in Lawrence for the water treatment. And it's used there to basically add the gases to the material and making fertilizer at the end.
Okay.
So it's not a standard use of the compost. You might hear, you might hear folks talk about the highest and best use of the material. As far as disposal goes, the infrastructure is not there to support everything 100%. So we can't say that we want this, but you have to do this with it when that doesn't exist. Same thing with mattresses. The state's banning mattresses this year. So what are we going to do, right? What are we going to do? Where are we going to bring them? If anybody on the body can tell me where we're going to bring them, let's talk, because there is no way to bring them locally. So we need to have these conversations where we're developing this infrastructure locally, creating jobs locally. Otherwise we're going to be paying $40-50 a mattress to send out of state to get recycled. And that's coming down from, DEP in November. We're already working on putting out RFIs and RFPs and RFQs and everything else. We want to know what we're going to do, but we also don't want to do it at the expense of, a third-party billion-dollar corporation that wants to say, yeah, we'll take them for, $60 each.
Yeah.
So, we have to really think this through, but I think there's a lot of opportunity for these materials, especially mattresses and textiles. Those are the two biggest things. The next two things to go on that same list is construction material, tires, propane. It's going to be on the same prohibited list coming through that's written by the state in their master plan, so.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to think about, and I'm strongly, and as Councilor Lara alluded to, have talked about it with both Councilor Lara and Baker, I think that there are definitely opportunities for city jobs here and for city facilities. I also think it's worth contemplating the fact that, it's a little known fact that part of the reason for the wave of annexation of neighboring towns into larger cities 100 years ago was the fact that the larger cities figured out sewage treatment plants, right? And everybody was like, oh, I really want to be part of that. And it didn't make sense for every town to build one, so they just conglomerated, right? And I think when you think about something like that, you think why shouldn't Boston not only have a facility that is dealing with the mattress problem for us, but we're the place that all of the surrounding towns, right, are paying for the privilege of getting rid of that, and it's better for them than going to the multinational as well, and it's better for us because it, generates local jobs.
Yeah, it could create revenue on our side.
Right, exactly. So
to kind of offset some other costs.
Right, which would be, so I think thinking about that kind of stuff, that would be great. Do we right now, we've got the composting pilot for the 10,000 folks. Do we have yet a roadmap for how that spreads out citywide, or are we imagining we're going to run the pilot and then do that? I mean, I think obviously you're hearing some interest on the council of maybe not going the outsourced route for the sort of overall thing, but that would take some real infrastructure. And I guess I'm also curious whether we're thinking at all about having a path into participating, not at the first round, but eventually for some of our smaller businesses, because some of our little, when you're at a food cart hole in the wall level, for some of them, I think, there's a lot of interest. And then I'm going to tag onto that a question just about, I think we've lowered the threshold for our food recycling program. And I don't know if that's your area, but.
That's actually in November as well from the state. So it's going to be a generator for half a ton of material per week. Mm-hmm. So some of the bigger restaurants in the city are going to be held to that.
And it's up till now, it's been for a ton, right? So
yeah, so
it hasn't hit as many.
They're cutting, so they're going to cut it back.
Okay.
Again, that's not, at the moment, it's not under the purview of Public Works, but we're working on that, see what that looks like.
Do we have any, like, do we have a food recycling program with our schools or anything? Like, I'm just trying to get a sense of the availability.
I'm not sure from my perspective. I know they've been working on something, trying to get some of the cafeterias, because they will fall under that guideline or the threshold of half a ton. So I think they have something in the works for this fall.
Okay, but you think that's a BPS worry right now, or who do you?
I would believe so, yeah.
Okay.
It's not a public works. We don't service BPS for trash. They have their own contract. And thinking back to Councilor Lara's question about what regulations could change and stuff, you know, a lot of city agencies are getting picked up because we picked them up. I don't know if they've been grandfathered in or they're historically just been, Public Works will do it. I think it's worth another conversation at some point during the budget season possibly of, you know, how we make the residential program more efficient, but also hold everybody else accountable for the waste that they're generating. You know, my budget, my team's budget, division's budget includes a lot of things that, for lack of a better term, should be on its own. And, you know, divisions within the city that have their own budgets that don't think about trash. So in order to get the people that we want to follow the zero waste plan as it's laid out in 2019, we have to lead by example, and that's one of the guidelines in the book. And the plan itself is to lead by example. So we need to get our ducks in a row and really identify, you know, the shifts that we can make, the changes, easier things, and to get people thinking trash and waste reduction as a whole. But I think, you know, bringing it to the budget conversations will be, you know, something that would help to get people to think that way.
Right, what gets measured gets managed. Can you talk to me a little bit as my last, and then I'll go to colleagues. E-waste, so I know we've got the hazardous materials pickup, but a thing I'm hearing more and more is just, you know, people have batteries, people have wires, people have, you know, and sort of it's a huge amount of our consumer goods have some electronic component. That's only becoming more true as we get, like, you know, the smart objects in the home, and I think people don't really know what to do with those. I don't think it's really plausible that everyone's gonna, like, know about 5 days to bring them somewhere. I also think, you know, at a kind of zoom out level, we know that there's a lot of rare earth metals that are causing quite a lot of environmental degradation, like, around the world, that are going into these things. So if there was some way to make sure that we were actually, you know, getting these things back recycled to the extent possible would be good. So I just wonder if you could speak a little bit to, like, our plans and processes.
Yeah,
around
so
that.
that's a great question. E-waste has obviously been growing. You know, I mentioned earlier, our hazardous waste events have like 1,000 people show up in 5 hours. 90% of those folks come with e-waste. So a lot of the stuff that's driving the traffic is the folks that are dedicated to get their e-waste recycled, and they wait in line with 1 or 2 items. You know, so we know that the demand is there. People are passionate about it. We're working on a pop-up event this year before the first hazardous waste event. So it'll be electronics only. And we think that we'll have quite a demand there that might help us out for the hazardous events. So, but in addition to that, as far as long-term planning, you know, we know there's a demand for that as well as other products. So we have a consultant right now that we had an RFP out for to basically find a place where we can build a CHARM, which stands for the Center for Hard to Recycle Materials. So if we could have a CHARM in the city and then maybe multiple recycling hubs where a couple of items can be brought, you know, it'll increase the opportunities for all the residents to have access to somewhere to go. It may be open 24/7, or it might be a stationed place. We're not sure if it's locked up yet, what it looks like. But essentially having, you know, options for residents far beyond 5 days a year. And that's critical if we want people to participate and actually have these things recycled. So looking forward to what happens with that RFP as well.
Yeah, no, I think that would be a great thing to have, and I think if you could, it's like, it's frustrating to think that our current capacities are overwhelmed by the people who are proactively trying to recycle their electronics. Because what we would like would be that for those people, it's super easy, and then we're playing the public education game and trying to make it easier for everybody who isn't thinking about it. But the fact that even if you think about it right now, it's like real hard to figure out is, I think, not where we want to be.
Yeah, we definitely don't want people to come to Hazardous Waste and then email you saying they had a terrible time sitting in line for 3 hours, you know what I mean? But they were behind all the people with the e-waste.
Yeah.
You know, so if e-waste has a place,
Yeah, right.
but if essentially everything should have a place. You know what I mean? And I think as you get into the discussions of other cities talking about, you know, drop-off centers and stuff like that, I think that, you know, this is where we're trying to line up with some of that work and make it so that residents aren't burdened by the programs that we have. If we want them to participate, but then ask them to go sit in line for 3 hours, you know, it's kind of, and I think that's counterproductive on our end. So just trying to streamline things a little bit better for everybody would be helpful.
Yeah. And sorry, I said that was my last question, but it's not. Do we track what happens? Like, we're selling these bales of trash and recycling. Do we have a sense of like how much of the trash ends up in an incinerator, or like kind of like where it's going, or are we operating a kind of don't ask, don't tell, you bought our trash, that's enough for us to know? Like, what's the degree to which we're tracking all of that?
So all of our trash goes to either an incinerator or transfer station that will then go to an incinerator. So nothing's going to landfill. More so for the recycling, I think your question is, you know, we bring the recycling, how much of it is actually recycled? Because there's a lot of, you know, stories going on the news and everything about, you know, 9% of it's recyclable. You know, we don't get detailed information from Casella. Basically, when we dump it there, they have to bale it and process it. Then it becomes mixed with other communities. It becomes mixed with commercial recycling, cardboard, and you know, stuff like that. So we don't have an exact amount. They've said anywhere from 12 to 15% is residuals, which would be trash. So the rest of it would be being baled and sent for, you know, what should be proper recycling. So.
And yeah, I always just think that's, I mean, obviously, ultimately, as we try to track our carbon budget and the impact on the city, you know, on our goals, we're going to have to reckon with what's happening in the industry at the end with all of it. Actual last question, and very much back in the district tactile stuff. Councilor Flynn referenced timing. Obviously, just before I joined the council, there was a change in the contract that started trash at 6 a.m., which was frustration for a number of the neighborhoods I represent, where folks put trash on the sidewalk, and neighbors had sort of tried to really build the social compact that we put it out in the morning and not the evening, because that way we avoid the rats. But then when you're asking people to get up before 6 a.m. as opposed to before 7 a.m., like it's a more difficult ask. And so you see more trash out in the evening, and then more of the predictable rodent problems. And then, you know, I think then people get frustrated because, like, well, actually the trucks don't hit my neighborhood till 10 or 11 or noon, and I sort of know that, but do I know it for sure enough to not put my trash out until the morning, right? And so I guess, and then relatedly, I think we require the commercial trash pickup folks to come in the sort of off hours, like overnight in the evening, so that they don't conflict with our people. But in some of my neighborhoods, where we have intense mixed use zones, that is, for instance, resulting in very loud trash pickup activities in the shared commercial residential alleys of the Back Bay in ways that wake residents up at all hours and are like really not great for quality of life. So it all kind of drives towards this question of like, is there a way for us to know more exactly? It seems like if we knew more exactly when the trash trucks were coming, there would be a potential for bags not to be out on the street for as long in the parts of the city where we don't have bins. There'd be a potential to maybe coordinate better so that the commercial trash is not conflicting with ours, but doesn't come in the wee hours in quite the same way, or, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of curious. Those are a lot of constituent like challenges and questions that we field.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff packed in that question. A lot of really great things. The only thing I'll say about the commercial sector is that the city doesn't regulate the commercial sector, nor does there is no time
Okay.
then there's no ordinance from the state as well for trash collection for commercial zones. So, I mean, ideally, if you own a restaurant and you have all your trash, you close at 1 a.m., you don't want that stuff sitting out there as a resident. You don't want the restaurant downstairs having their trash out there till the morning, right? So it's, you know, we will cite businesses for having stuff out too early or at the wrong time, just like we would for residential. But as far as getting into the regulation of what time, you know, if it's a mixed zone, then it's, you know, chances are you have trash trucks coming in 24/7, especially over in the back bay that you're talking about. It's very highly mixed with commercial stuff, so you know, we don't technically regulate any of that. So, and on the residential side, 6 a.m. was put into place in 2019. It was a citywide change. It wasn't a neighborhood-wide change. Certainly willing to work with residents in the Beacon Hill area. I've been in touch with Patricia Tully and other folks, and you know, we can work with neighbors on the times and expectations of when trucks will be there, but you know, we don't control the trucks in terms of where they are. And you know, if you have a nice day, like maybe today's a decent day, or you know, the weather may impact things, personnel, you know, those trucking companies have to deal with COVID also. They had a lot of people out. You know, there's a lot of injuries in that line of work. So it's, you know, if we promise somebody a time, it's to the point where, you know, can we make sure that that's the time specifically? Or are we then setting ourselves up for a conversation later where, you know, you said you'd be here at 8, it's 8:30, where are you? You know, like, how specific of a time are we looking at? And I'm sure we could probably come up with a range, but I want to make sure that we're all on the same page with expectations.
Yeah.
You know, so it's something we can look at, but to get that change done, you know, across the board, 6 o'clock, this is the change, and it actually gets the trucks out there. You know, these guys get behind school buses just like we do. You know, they get behind, they're in traffic. You know, a car breaks down in the tunnel or something, like, there's things that happen.
Yeah.
So the earlier start time actually got a lot of these trucks on the road already, because they had to get into the tunnel by 5 in the morning before traffic, or, you know, so there's those reasons behind it. It wasn't to inconvenience the neighborhoods.
Yeah, and I wonder if even without giving people an estimate, like if there was some kind of, I don't know how close we are to having a public-facing tracker where somebody could actually just like see where the trucks are, because I know we have some kind of an internal version of that, or at least I think we do.
Yeah, I don't know. For private sector, I'm not sure how that would work. But,
Yeah.
I mean, we can talk about.
Yeah. Okay, all right, anyways, I'm gonna go to Councilor Braden.
Thank you, Brian. I get very animated when you talk about mattresses. I live in Alston, Brighton, and I just think about Alston Christmas and the thousands of mattresses that get dumped on the street, and how are we going to manage that? What's going to happen?
I'm gonna call you, and we're gonna figure it out. No, to be honest with you, we don't know yet, right? The best we can do is take examples from other cities that have started some similar programs and how they've rolled them out. Again, it's gonna come down to, you know, who's gonna collect it, where are we gonna bring it? Is there a fee? I don't envision that, but it certainly needs to be part of the conversation. You know, there's a lot of different things that need to be straightened out. You know, I think it's a great opportunity to create new contracts for either minority-owned businesses in the city, similar to the recycling bins, where they could pick up mattresses and bring them somewhere. Maybe, you know, there's a lot of different ideas that I have, and my team are working out some things, and it's an unknown for many cities in the state right now. The ban is in place, it's in writing, it's an official ban that's coming. The guidance on the ban is minimal, and it suggests that you use certain companies that are, you know, listed on the state contract, stuff like that. But as far as details on, you know, how a small community is going to actually financially pay for this new program, to just go back to Councilor Bach's point, you know, the carbon footprint is something that we're looking out for. But as we add these programs, we're adding more vehicles to the streets. So it's kind of a tough line to balance. You know, it's which way are we going as a city, as a country, as a state, as everything. You know, we want to create jobs, we want the infrastructure to be there, but we're also adding, you know, more emissions by adding more trucks, unless they're all electric somehow, which that doesn't exist either. So that infrastructure's behind as well. There's more and more electric trucks for trash and stuff coming on board, but we're nowhere near where we need for, you know, the city to have all electric vehicles. It's maybe someday, but today it doesn't exist.
The other, you know, weekend curbside textile pickup for recycling. I'm really delighted to see the textile bins, and they get filled up really quickly. How does the weekend curbside textile pickup work for bigger buildings? You know, for rather than small households, but you know,
Yeah.
the big.
Yeah, it's the same process. So it would just be a simple sign up and then put your stuff outside, get on the list. They do 50 pickups on a Saturday and 50 on a Sunday. There's obviously room to grow that program also, to get more pickups on the weekend, which I think we will over time. I think since February 1st, we did almost 20,000 pounds of clothes on home pickups alone.
Wow.
So the program is incredibly successful so far. I'm really happy that we started it. And that's a program that's actually cost neutral to the city. And it's, you know, we're saving all that from going to the trash, but we're at the same time, there's actually revenue involved with that. So it's
You get some revenue back.
yeah, it's not enough to cover, obviously, the price of recycling, but it certainly helps to have, you know, something coming in.
Yeah. That's good. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just to complete the advertisement for that, if somebody wanted a clothes pickup, how would they do that?
Yep, so if they go to boston.gov/textiles, there's a link. So you go right to the Helpsy's website. So the name of the company is Helpsy. They came on board a couple of years ago, started with a few bins, now they're all over the place. And then they're going to the houses, picking up, and Hooksett, New Hampshire, that you said was
Yep. They're
going to
join
be
us
on the
later.
next panel. They actually started home pickup last weekend, 2 days ago. So you can talk to them about their home pickups, and you know, it's exciting for us as a city of Boston to be in the forefront of you know, a new program like that.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, boston.gov/textiles. Awesome. Councillor Murphy?
So thank you for that, all of this. And I do appreciate Councilor Flynn's comment about how different neighborhoods have different needs for trash pickup. And I may even argue that it could go as much as, you know, different streets even, right? Different households have different needs. So please include us in spreading that word and educating people about, you know, the changes coming and how we can help that. And also appreciate also your comment about the different departments across the city and how we have to hold them accountable and responsible. I know trash pickup is one, snow removal is another, where certain departments are kind of expected, even though, say, the school department has their own budget. And I think if we look closer at each department to see, you know, how they handle their disposal of trash and other things that might be helpful for us. I know as a BPS teacher for over 20 years, unless a teacher took it on as a task they wanted to, most paper was never recycled ever. It was just thrown away, right? So there is not a program in place across the board in the, you know, public schools, and we use a lot of paper in our public schools. So definitely would like to look at the different departments and, you know, what they're doing. And like you had mentioned, a lot of times it's just assumed that your department does that, and you know that's not part of your budget. So however we can help to separate that out so we're not overburdening what you're already doing would be helpful.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. That's all.
Great, thank you so much, Councillor Murphy. I'm going to go to Councillor Lara, and then we'll thank Brian, and we do have both Hooksett, New Hampshire and Seattle on the line for our second panel. So, Councillor Lara.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you again, Brian. This has been incredibly informative, and I just want to echo Councillor Murphy's comments, particularly around it feels like there is a resource and a capacity squeeze because we haven't necessarily streamlined the process. and that there's an opportunity by streamlining the process that we can strengthen the residential program and come up with a different plan for like a more streamlined process for other city agencies and commercial. And so and that leads to my question. So I had some comments around BPS and also BHA in terms of like the composting program and all of those things, which I think that you've half answered in the sense that you're not responsible. So that kind of answers my question. But commercial. So I think that we often do ourselves a disservice because we focus, particularly when it comes to environmental justice, we kind of focus hyper on the individual. But when we're talking about composting, we have an opportunity to have a much larger impact if we also have a commercial program because we get a lot of food waste from restaurants in the city of Boston. And so can you tell me a little bit more about what commercial programs currently exist? Who is responsible for commercial? How does that happen? You said that there was no state ordinance for trash collection. Is there a composting program for residents? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, so the composter for the commercial is private. So the city itself doesn't handle commercial compost or commercial trash pickup. You know, it was it's strictly residential, all of our programs. So everything else is private. The private programs do exist for composting. Obviously, there's private trash haulers all throughout the city that you see in overnight. You know, there are programs that exist. It's not so much, you know, in BHA, for example, you know, we pick up the trash over there. It's in this budget proposal to expand Project Oscar to BHA to help them, not to take over the program, but to help to educate and kind of get them on the right path. They've started adding textile boxes at BHA properties, which has been great. So it's a good sign from them that they want to do the right thing. But at the same time, you know, we're picking up, you know, close to 15,000 tons a year from them. That's coming out of the residential trucks, and you know, we're picking them up the same day that your house is getting picked up. We're going around all these developments twice, 3 times a week. You know, so one of the benefits of separating either the city agencies and all these larger entities, BHA, schools recycling's on ours as well. You know, it's going to create an opportunity for another company to come out, whether it's a small, brand new startup company, to be able to do a small contract. You know, we don't expect, and we have never got a lot of bids for the larger trash contracts, you know, and it's because it's real expensive to operate. These trucks are real expensive, though, you know, the prevailing wage plus benefits and health insurance and all that, you know, but if you had a contract that was for 1 truck, 2 trucks, something that was feasible for a smaller startup company that could be, you know, monitored and kind of coached through, you know, that's how you create the competition that we need for the next 5, 10, 15 years. So they got to start somewhere, but no one's going to authorize a contract to someone who just created a business at the AG's office. You know, we want proven vendors that can do the job, professional guys and ladies that know how to do the work, maintain the equipment, whatever. So that's kind of why it's always been contracted. But just as a point, you know, and it would be nice too for, you know, while we're on the subject, just this BHA trash and the schools recycling is also stuff that we pick up.
So you don't do the school's trash?
Schools do their own trash.
Okay, but you do the
They're working on their own compost program. We pick up the recycling, going back to 2009, 2010, I think, as a pilot that just kept growing. And the schools kept growing, the program kept growing. You know, the same guy that does your streets, stopping at 5 or 10 schools, picking up 100 bins. So when it comes in terms of who's doing what and knowing what you're doing, you know, there's no metrics that are coming out that'll tell a story. So, you know, it's like we have no idea what the schools do for recycling because it's going in with your trash or you're recycling at your house. If it's, you know, so it's.
You can't measure.
If we want to achieve zero waste, we have to know what zero means. We have to know, you know, 80% of what? 80% by 2035, but 80% of the residential, it's going to have to include the commercial to get there.
Yeah.
So that's a huge conversation. But it's going to have to be, every agency doing 80% diversion. But if you don't know what you're doing, and you just take for granted that Public Works or, someone else is doing it, and there's no ownership, there's no reporting, there's no conversation, the zero waste plan might as well be, 2055, not 2035.
Yeah.
It's going to take a lot of work. So I'm really grateful to be here because these are the things that we need to talk about to get those next meetings set up so that we can see what the future looks like. We can work together and talk to the community members and the residents, get them involved. Don't just, come up with a program. So there's a lot to do. Again, it's really been helpful to just share some of the stuff we're doing so that you guys are aware that, we are working on a lot of stuff. We're not going to slow down. No, it doesn't matter if there's a pandemic. We're going to go right through it. So, so thanks.
Yeah. So my last question, and maybe this is not a question for you, but maybe just a general question, is that we're talking a lot about capacity. We're talking a lot about bringing this stuff in-house, city infrastructure, city jobs. Do you see an opportunity for how to develop, like basically ultimately training? Like, where do the workers come from? What kind of training is necessary? How, we talk a lot about the trades, and so do you see an opportunity for building an infrastructure by which we're kind of feeding, public school graduates or people who live in the city of Boston into these jobs?
Well, there's a lot of training that goes into the, operating the trucks and obviously CDL licenses.
Yep.
Public Works, Central Fleet has a driver education training. They have a CDL class. I'm not sure how closely they work with the schools. But there's certainly a lot of opportunity in the Public Works Department, in the pipeline with, some of the schools for some jobs, entry-level jobs, driving job, all kinds of jobs. There's a ton of jobs posted on the website. But certainly looking into that would be something we could work on. The city's trash right now is contracted privately, so I'm not sure on what that would take to get, kind of like a assistance program, kind of to get them in the door to learn how to do it. But as far as the licensing and stuff, I think that's probably something we could do.
Thank you so much, Brian.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Brian, for joining us and just being so knowledgeable and all the work that you're doing. We really appreciate it, and I am confident that there will be more follow-up conversations, but I want to thank you for joining us today, and also your staff who are sitting behind you and I know support all this work as well. We appreciate them.
Thank you.
And with that, I want us to go. We've been joined a while back, and they've been waiting very patiently by Seattle and New Hampshire. And I'm going to go to Seattle first. And I just want to say that one of the, these hybrid hearings are a little tricky because we can't see everybody. But on the flip side, the nice thing about them is they let us tap friends from far away and ask them about what they're doing. So grateful to Seattle for joining us today, specifically Susan Fife-Ferris, who's their Director of Solid Waste Planning and Program Management. And so we're looking forward to hearing from Susan. Susan, you have the floor. We can't hear. 1 second. Let's just make sure that we've got volume in the council chamber.
Can you hear me?
We can, yes, wonderful.
Yay.
Great, we've got
Okay,
Susan.
great.
And I just want to say to Brian, would be delighted if you stayed, but also we
Sure.
totally understand if you need to go and do your.
No, okay.
So either way. Susan, you have the floor.
Hi, I'm Susan Fife-Ferris, and as she mentioned, I'm the Director of Planning and Program Management for Seattle Public Utilities Solid Waste line of business, and that's within the city of Seattle. And I'm joined here today also by my colleague Kate Kurtz, who is a resident expert in organics, and we understand you had questions about organics, so I prepared a short PowerPoint to run through just to give you kind of an overview of what we do and then some of the organics work we're doing. So I'm not sure who has that PowerPoint to bring it up, but if they could bring it up, that would be fabulous. Hey.
Wonderful.
Great.
And Susan,
Okay.
thanks for sending that ahead. We also, just so you know, the counselors also have
Oh.
physical copies in front of us, so it's perfect. So that way,
That's
folks watching
great.
at home can see it on the screen, and we've got it in front of us too.
Okay, fabulous. So this first picture just kind of gives a really quick overview of, that's Seattle, Space Needle, what we're known for, and we have everything divided into 3 waste streams. So I had the benefit of listening to the previous conversation, which was really useful. One of the big differences is we have mandatory garbage, recycling, and organics collection, and everybody has to do it. And we also, the garbage is in the residential and the commercial sector. But I'll get a little bit more into that. If you'll go to the next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, great. So this graphic shows how our materials are managed, within the city of Seattle, basically the flow. And so we have mandatory collection of garbage, recycling, organics. Recycling and organics are banned from our garbage. So we actually have inspectors and compliance agents that work with our haulers to make sure that materials don't go in the garbage that are technically able to go in the organics and into the recycling end. And we have 7 large service contracts. So I heard the discussion about keeping stuff in-house and out-of-house. We have 3 collection contracts, 2 big ones that are our primary ones, and then 1 smaller one for some C&D type of work. We have 3 processing contracts. We have 2 for organics and 1 for recyclables. And we have a long haul contract. So our garbage, when it goes down to a landfill that is down in Oregon, Arlington, Oregon. It's about 320 miles. So we long haul our material, and we have basically you only pay for what you ship. So the more we recycle and the more that goes in the organics and the less we ship off to the landfill, the less money we're spending. We own and operate 2 transfer stations, so all of our garbage and all our organics that are produced within the city run through those transfer stations that we do own and operate. And we have a pay-as-you-throw billing rate system, so you basically only pay for what you contract for. So if you contract for a larger garbage container, then you pay more money. If you are able to divert more material to recycling and or the organics container, then you usually can downsize your your garbage container, and you pay less money. You do pay a separate fee for your organics container, but it's a smaller amount than what you would for the same volume for in garbage. And then recycling is embedded, the cost of recycling is embedded in your garbage fee. And then we're an enterprise fund, so anything that our customers pay into the system has to be used for solid waste related activities. It doesn't go into the general fund. So that's really key to, the money coming in has to be used for solid waste related activities. And then under Washington state law, businesses can independently contract for recycling and organics through separate contractors, but they can't not recycle and not divert their organics. So next slide, please. Now, it looks like we went to a blank slide. So I'll wait till you get the presentation back. Somehow lost the presentation.
Just hang tight 1 sec. I'm sure we'll get it back up.
Okay, yeah. Well, in the meantime, I'll start talking about the next slide, and then we can go through it real fast. It's going to kind of give you an idea of the size of Seattle. So I'm pretty familiar with Boston, having had a couple, a child and a future son-in-law who lived in Boston for a long time. and spending a lot of time there. But Seattle, just to give you kind of some relative perspective to your size, so our population right now is around 750,000 people. We've grown about 25% in the last decade. We've boomed quite a bit. Let's see if it comes back up. Oh, great. And this gives you kind of the lay of the land for Seattle. We're bounded by water. Half of our city is actually underwater. So we have Puget Sound, which is a huge body of water to our west, and we have Lake Washington to our east. And what you see, the actual downtown area is right smack dab in the middle, and then we have 4 areas that we split our collection contract into, and we generate approximately 712,000 tons of recycling and composting. We do 300, so that's grand generation. Anyways, I think we have very low per capita. We've managed to keep our per pound, per person, per day generation pretty low, about half of what it is on a national basis. And our recycling rate's about 54%. And that's a combined single family, multifamily, commercial, and then cell call. That's what SH stands for. And the shift to teleworking obviously has impacted our streams. I'm sure it did in Boston too, where our commercial dropped significantly and we saw our residential increase quite a bit. So next slide, please. So since I was asked to talk about the organics program that we have, I thought it would be really interesting for you to see what our history is. And so we've had a very long, multiple decade experience with bringing organics diversion to our city. So we have it's embedded in our ethic. It started with a composting policy back in the 1980. We had yard waste banned in 89 from the garbage. And during that time, our big emphasis was on on-site management. So composting in your backyard, vermicomposting, which are worm bins in your house or in your business. We really had a big ethic that was built around that on-site management of organics. But also in 1989, we had a major composting processor open in our area. And that allowed us to start increasing the amount of material we were diverting at the curb. And then, the state really emphasized recycling and the diversion of organics and with the Waste Not Washington Act, which was passed in 89. And we started long hauling our material, as I said before, in 1990. Then since that time, we have slowly moved out through pilots, proved concepts, and then added food waste into the organics. So your green cart takes both your yard waste, but also your food and food soiled paper into that same container. And now we have moved, in the last 15 years to more emphasis on the curbside collection of organics and moving that material out to the organics processing facilities. Next slide, please. So one thing I wanted to talk about, and I heard mention about you want to do voluntary actions, and everybody has to do what works for their constituency. In Seattle, we've used mandates, and they've been very well received because of the work that we've done through education and training. But this kind of gives you an idea of how, with the population growth, we saw the increasing volumes peaking, in the early 2000s. And then we added food waste, which is a pretty large portion of what's left in the garbage, and it started going down. But what we're finding is that is not going to be enough. That, you can mandate it and you can require it and you can provide the options to put it at the curb. But really where we're finding, in order to reduce, and we've made a commitment of reducing our overall generation by 50% by 2030, and that's part of a Pacific Coast Collaborative commitment, that in order to do that, we really have to work upstream and decrease the amount of material being produced in the first place, so waste prevention. So success is going to depend really on prevention and also food rescue, not just the organics program that's downstream. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we've really started emphasizing is food rescue. And we can do a quick deep dive. We've done a lot of innovation labs where we've brought stakeholders from all over the city, from healthcare workers to homeless advocates to food banks to grocery stores to big Amazon and Microsoft, who have their industrial cafes, to the restaurant industry. We brought everybody together and started talking about how do we get them to have less food that needs rescuing, and then make sure that edible quality food is being rescued and put into the hands of the food insecure. And I'm sure in Boston, just like Seattle, that you have a large food insecure and that population, and that really increased a lot during the pandemic, and acknowledging that. But we have a large homeless population in Seattle. The West Coast is, dealing with that. And so making sure that food is getting into the hands of those who need it is really important. So we have recently done a grocery rescue assessment, and there's a ton of siloed people working in the food world, and we're trying to figure out ways to get people to talk. And we found that there's lack of standardization, insufficient and siloed data, and communication gaps. So one of the things that we're working on right now is we're going to be piloting these yellow bins with a large grocery store starting next month, which will be here soon, to see if we can't figure out ways to document, make sure that edible food is being moved correctly, and then the bins would be reused. So they would, we'd get rid of the using of the boxes in all kinds of different ways to do it. So that's something that we're working, and the big thing is that we want to track, can we wash these? We're tracking them. Can we get the bins back to the store? And are the food hunger organizations getting the food that they need? Next slide, please. So another area Seattle is actively supporting is the circular food economy. So you'll hear me say a lot about circularity. We're really big on the circular economies when it comes to recycling, but also in the organics industry. So we're supporting Washington State University's research. Washington State University, just to ground you, we have University of Washington that's located in Seattle, and Washington State University is located over on the east side of our state, which is really the agricultural breadbasket of our state. It's a huge agricultural area, and WSU is really focused on that. So we're doing research to quantify climate benefits from organics application to agricultural soils given different cropping systems. We're working at the legislative end to enact programs that would subsidize compost application to agricultural fields, and we're supporting programs such as sustainable farms and fields. And we're doing other things along those lines, but really trying to close that loop with the, the food, circular food economy. Next slide, please. And one of the big things, and I'm not sure what your processing capacity is, but having adequate composting capacity, or just like having adequate recycling capacity, is really critical to a successful program. And so, what you see here is a picture of Mount Rainier, which if you've ever been up in our area, it's a mountain, and you'll hear it's a mountain out today. It's a huge active volcano, but it hasn't blown up recently, thank goodness. Anyways, that's in the background. That's one of the main composting facilities where a lot of our material go to, and a tour that was happening. That's the compost, and that's the food that results from having, quality soil being used in our fields. And compost is critical to restoration of soils and growing, quality food. So having adequate composting processing capacity is really critical to a successful organics program, because you can put all the material you want at the curb and collect it as much as you want, but if you don't have that adequate capacity, it has no place to go. Next slide, please. And that's it. That's a quick overview. That's a compost pile. That's in one of our transfer stations. That is one of our haulers trucks in the background. And those are steamers on the top to help keep the everything moist and the dust down. So, questions?
Amazing. Thank you so much, Susan. Really appreciate that. I think what I'm going to do is go next to Denise Cummings from Hooksett, who's here to talk more about their recycling side, and then we'll do questions for both of you, just because counselors will probably have questions on both sides, so I think we'll do that. So,
sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so Denise, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, how you guys doing?
Great. Thank you so much for joining us from north of here.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. I was pretty excited, and I'm not as prepared with any slideshows or anything. We're kind of a small town.
We're delighted to have you.
Very good. Well, I guess what I wanted to say is that Hooksett has been recycling, and they started in 2012 with automated equipment picking up their trash and then one barrel for single stream recycling. And what happened along the years, the price went from $25 a ton single stream recycling to upwards of $142 a ton when our town council said, I think we're all set with single stream, since it was twice the price of what trash was being charged for disposal. And unfortunately, single stream, there was a lot of contamination. People think that everything's recyclable, including their trash and plastic bag. And with all the education that we put out there and tagging barrels and there's, I want to say, even with the source separated, the residents coming here to sort their recycling, we still find contamination. The plastic bags, the plastic hangers aren't exactly recyclable. We tell our residents, as long as it has a triangle on it, 1 through 7, that's recyclable. And they feel like their children's toys are recyclable also. Do not do food compost at this time. I was kind of going to get some education from our state DES department, and because they have quite the criteria, and we would have to be licensed. But when we did do we have our recycled building, we have residents drop off the cardboard. We recycled about 24 tons of cardboard a month, and that's from a population of about 14,000 people. They bring all their cardboard here, and we get upwards of $150, $155 a ton for that. We also just started with Healthy, the textile recycling. We just started this week, but prior to that, and in conjunction with that, we also have an epilepsy box stationed right in our transfer station. You also talked about electronics. We had we actually just changed vendor. We had a vendor that would drop off a 24-yard bin for us, and we would jingle all of our electronics into this bin for a set price that they were charging us. We since moved on and have gone with North Coast LLC Recycling. They're more local to us, and the pricing is amazing. I give them a phone call, and what they do is set up gaylords in our tipping floor against the wall, and that's where we stay our electronics to begin with. Now we can put them right in the gaylords. We call them up and say, hey, we have 4 gaylords ready to go, and he comes and snatches them up and replaces them with empty ones. And that has been, and we get certificate of recycled. So he sends us back a receipt with where all our electronics have been recycled to. Another thing that heard you go is the hours, and we are open 6 days a week here, and I had your PWD department talk about, you know, I understand you're much larger than we are, but staffing is critical, and the people that you have working for you is critical because they're the ones that make it happen. Honestly, I heard him speak about these charm buildings, which kind of intrigued me, kind of sounded like our cycle building. And I think that would be a great help to you guys if you had a place, because people want to do the right thing. Hazardous waste, we do hazardous waste every day here. We take paint in electronics every day so that we don't get that 50 cars or 100 cars just do their electronic recycling. We do it every day. Our batteries, our lithium batteries, we do call to recycle. And again, our employees bag lithium batteries and we ship that. That's free of charge to us as a municipality. They take those batteries for free, essentially. I don't know. We separate glass. We try to separate glass. So that's actually picked up. Residents are picking up on that. We do about 25 tons every 6 months. Doesn't seem like much, but when you see the of an area you need to store it, it's a load of glass, if you can imagine that. We also recycle the aluminum cans, so that's something again, storage capacity is huge on where do you store your bales of aluminum cans or your plastics. And we are fortunate that we have an overhang that we're able to keep these items out of the weather. We also have a storage trailer for our cardboard. I am going to be visiting other facilities in New Hampshire that do a really good job, even sorting their plastics, separating their ones from their threes and their sevens, and I'd like to have these containers. I'm just waiting to get out there and see. I just became crew chief here just past July. So I don't know if I don't have much else than that, like Christmas trees, like after Christmas. We worked with the Boy Scouts, and the Boy Scouts picked up Christmas trees and delivered them to the goat farms around here. And so it was essentially free for us, and the farms got the Christmas trees, and the Scouts were working on badges. We try to encourage community outreach. And we are actually sponsoring an Earth Day litter roadside pickup coming up in less than a month from now. So I know that we also at town hall, we give them barrels so that they can save their papers for us, and we go pick those up once a week along with their cardboard that they sort out and stored for us to go pick up, and we just bale that with cardboard that we get here and paper that we get here. So if you have any questions, I'm open for questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Denise. Thank you to both you and Susan for coming. I have a question for each of you, and maybe I'll ask them each, and then that way you'll know what's coming. So I'll go to Susan first, but Denise, my question for you when we come back is sort of, I think one of the reasons that we were really interested in hearing from Hooksett, even though you guys are so much smaller than we are, is that, you went to single source, it made sense at that time, the situation changed, and you guys changed what you were doing. And I think we've heard from our department how much of a difference single source has made in terms of the volumes, but also that we probably need to innovate again here, right, on a number of fronts. And I'm kind of interested in how your residents so far have adapted behavior-wise. Like, it sounds like, there was a cost driver for the town. There was also, I think, you guys found that a lot of it was getting incinerated, I think was what I heard. And so that was part of what drove it. So it's sort of both a green reason and a money reason to make the shift. But I'm curious when I come back to you just about, how much resistance you saw or how willing people were to come sort of go back to a sorted system, and and how you guys thought about messaging that and all that. So that's my question for you. I'll go first back to Susan and just ask Susan, I mean, you mentioned processing capacity, and I think, you know, you heard some of the conversation. I don't know exactly when you came on, but there's a number of counselors interested in the question of whether we, the city of Boston, could host some more, like some of the processing capacity, especially as we think about really standing up composting at scale. And so I'm curious, like, do any of these facilities, like the one that you showed it on the final slide, like, are any of them owned by the city? Did the city have any relationship to them getting launched? Like, what's kind of how have you guys thought about as you drive, because you've basically driven a market with this series of mandates, and so how have you thought about making sure there's enough infrastructure in place for that? Obviously, the long haul site is not close to the city or part of the city, but I'm just sort of curious about how you've thought about that.
Yeah, so first off, I have to apologize. I have a cat who's trying to insist on photobombing, so I apologize for that.
We never mind the four-legged friends. And
yeah. Anyway, so I can still talk even though he's like being very insistent. Capacity. So the facility that you saw at the end is a transfer station that is actually owned by the city of Seattle. But it's a transfer station and not a processing facility, in the sense that when I say processing facility, when I'm thinking about recycling or organics, I'm thinking about actually taking the material and turning it into something that then can be sold into a secondary market for remanufacturing into something else, or turned into compost. So that can then be sold as compost. So in that case, what I'm talking about are MRFs, some material recovery facilities, when you're thinking about recycling. And, I don't know how much material you guys are handling, but running a MRF is a huge commitment. And we are very fortunate that we have a number of MRFs, only one in the city of Seattle that can handle the volume of material that we run through it. But there's another MRF there too that also handles materials coming out of the commercial sector and the materials coming from other suburban cities that aren't part of the Seattle system. And so we go through a contracting process, an RFP process, where we specify exactly what we want, and then we enter into long-term contracts with these. And so facilities have developed in response to that. And we have a number of other MRFs in the area that aren't in Seattle that also could handle our neighboring jurisdictions' material. For you to do it, it takes pretty large footprint. It also takes, commitment to the financial side. In our contract with our MRF, we have we pay them just to process our material, but we recoup the value of the commodities, so we get the market value back for how much aluminum they sell into the market, or paper, depending on the quality. So we have a vested interest, a financial interest, in them doing a good job. So our contamination rate is, around 12%, which is higher than it was when we had source separated materials coming in. But we did go to the commingled approach. That was kind of the industry was going to that commingled approach back in the mid 2000s. So we jumped on board. China sword hit us hard on the West Coast, in the sense that a lot of our material was being shipped over to Southeast Asia and China. And so we've looked at that as an opportunity. You have a zero waste plan. We have a zero waste plan. We've looked at that as an opportunity to try to really encourage the development of domestic markets. And so we're working at the state level, because Seattle can't do it alone. We need to work at it at a state and a regional level. So we also work up and down the coast very closely with our neighboring states of California and Oregon. And we work with our, British Columbia, which is another thing. So it's all depending on how much money you want to invest and then manage it yourself, or do you want the freedom to be able to contract, and then depending on how the market changes. Another thing that we're very invested in Seattle is bringing extended producer responsibility to our state of Washington. And we've been working very aggressively on that across our state with other stakeholders to bring that so that we can get producers to come in and take more responsibility for the materials that they're putting into the market that we have to manage. And I'll leave it at that. I'm sure there'll be other questions.
Great, thanks so much. That's super helpful. And I think we may follow up and just see if we can get any of your guys' model contracts or RFPs just to understand. I mean, I think on the consumer side, there is a fundamental Rubicon that we haven't crossed, which is this charging for disposal in our residential and commercial, residential at least, so world, but it would be really helpful to see, like, for instance, the way you guys have vested your interest in recycling some of those more valuable materials. That's an interesting model for us.
And all our contracts, just so you know, are available online. So you can, we have pretty much everything online, and if you can't find it or your staff can't find it, they can reach out to me and I can put them in contact with our contract manager.
Great, and just so I understand, the 712,000 tons of waste from 2020, that is inclusive of commercial and residential in the Seattle context, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Great. So, yeah, because I was thinking, I was like, gee, you guys are basically the same size as us, and that's so much higher than our numbers, but it's because we're not dealing with the commercial side, so that makes sense.
Yeah, and for the data junkie out there, we have a recycling report, waste prevention recycling report we publish every year, and so the one for 2020 materials is available online too. So anyone who's a data junkie can go in there, and it's got way more data than you'll ever want to know.
Amazing, no such thing. Great, well, thank you, and I'm just gonna go to Denise with that question about kind of culture change and the embrace or non-embrace by your residents, and then I'll go to my colleagues for their questions. So Denise, did you have any thoughts on that?
So the residents did have some opposition about actually sorting here. But as time goes on and as we educate them more and tell them you're making money, they're more likely to do more. So for instance, our cardboard, when we were getting checks for $3,800 a month and we put that out on Facebook, it brought in more residents. And every resident that comes into town, we try to educate them right away, and that so they don't know that we ever single streamed. There have been some cries for maybe a cardboard drop-off because that seems to be a big deal for people. That's something we are kind of looking at, but again, there's like a transportation cost for us to get it to a baler because the cardboard's to be baled. And you need equipment, you need bobcats, you need employees there to get better done. And so that was one that the residents have asked for, or just have one day we can just put cardboard in your recycle bin and have that up. It's something that we kind of look at. Our staffing is coming up. We've been through the pandemic running at half staff. So we've all been in circles around each other trying to make everything happen. So again, you put stuff out on Facebook and then all of a sudden everybody seems to know that you're making me or what the aluminum cans were going for. So they seem to not mind as much coming here to do their recycling. And during the pandemic, it was kind of fun because people would just come to drop off like one box because it was their day out and that's how they got out of the house, is come to the first station. So I think is you give them incentive, like, and we did put a fair amount of money back in town last year. It was let me see here, we put almost $1,000 worth of cardboard, back into our budget. I think is good, and it was better than the year before, and I only see that continuing to get better every year.
Yeah, no, that's great, and it's great to, it's great to think about how in that case, like, people can see, oh, we're doing this together, and it's having a positive impact on the town, and I think, in a different way in Seattle, the idea that, if people are grumbling about paying the fees, but then they're going back into the whole waste management system, so it's not, you know, there's a sense of the whole thing being like a virtuous cycle. It's good to hear about buy-in on that front. I'm gonna let my colleague, Councillor Braden, ask her questions.
No, I just want to thank you both for sharing your experience and all the great things you're doing. I'm impressed with your the ability for a small community to sort of reverse course and everybody on deck to try and increase your recycling and go away from the open single stream thing. So I think a lot of what we talk about is really about behavior modification in our communities and trying to educate people about the appropriate ways to recycle and not to contaminate the recycle bin with food and stuff that's going to make the recyclables less valuable. So again, I think it's all about education, and I thank you for sharing. I don't have any further questions at this time.
Before I ask another question, I'll just, well, I will ask another question, but Brian, if you have any questions, feel free to, you can just raise your hand, let me know.
Well, I guess for Hooksett, is the recycling curbside collected, or is the new dual stream a drop off by the resident?
It's a drop off by the resident. Did you hear me?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So it's obviously, it's not an exact parallel to our situation.
Well, it's good to know. Rule that out.
Yeah.
So I see in your...
But,
Go ahead, Denise.
oh yeah, we are looking at maybe doing, like I said, the cardboard drop off at some point. We're trying to come up with a plan for that. A satellite kind of place for them to drop off just their cardboard.
So you mean something that would be closer, like satellite drop-off spots for the cardboard?
Satellite, so something, could we have a river running through our town? So maybe something the other side of the river, on the east side of Hooksett, where a majority of our residents live.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So you're sort of, and since the cardboard is such a lucrative area, it might be worth it to you to do that also, right?
Right.
Got it. And then I was wondering if I could ask Susan, I mean, I have to be honest, it's a little bit discouraging to me just that, I mean, I feel like we're like a generous step behind you guys, because we have not really conquered the food waste thing, even from the, you know, we haven't had composting and stuff be part of our core program residentially, and then you guys are already on the other side of having done that and being like, oh gee, to really hit our targets, we need to modify everybody's behavior for like how much they waste. And it feels to me like we're gonna get there eventually, but we have some catching up to do on that sort of first step. And so I guess I was just wondering, kind of in a similar, like, when you guys made this, when you sort of phased this in, first as an option, then as a mandate for single family, then as a mandate for multifamily, I mean, what was the process of kind of like selling that like to the population? What was compliance like? I mean, you mentioned the fact that like stuff that's not supposed to be in the bales are banned, but like what does that actually look like in terms of like you're enforcing that against your contractors? What are they doing with like if there's a household that just keeps throwing stuff in that isn't what they're supposed to be throwing in, like how do they get corrected on that? Like I'm just trying to understand, you know, both voluntary and less voluntary compliance and what that looked like as you phase these things in.
Yeah, so I'm going to focus on the residential primarily with my comments. So when we first rolled out the food waste, it was a complex, what I'd call social marketing program in order to change people's behavior, where we really worked on overcoming the yuck factor, but there were also complexities that we had to overcome with respect to public health requirements, making sure that public health was on board with putting the materials in the organics container too. But then with the residents, it's just, you know, doing the pilots, proving that it's a concept that will work, and then a lot of publicity, education, more promotion, a lot of that over time. The mandates, though, is what really kicks it in. And so what does that look like? So we have an inspection and compliance group, but really the first onus is on the haulers when they're tipping, if they see significant contamination in the garbage, to do an oops tag. So oops tags are pretty effective in the single family residential where, you hang it off somebody's container and it says, oops, you have the wrong material. So we have what I'd call a four strikes before we try to actually find somebody. And we really go for the carrot as opposed to the stick. So, people will get an oops tag. Then if another event, they'll get another oops tag, and that's put into the computer system. So it's all tracked, date and pictures are taken. And then they'll get another oops tag, and that's when somebody will go out and do education. So the inspection team, somebody who is, overseeing the area that that person lives in, will go out and do some education, especially, if it's single family or multifamily, with either the tenants or the actual person. And then again, we'll do more education on the third one. And then technically on the fourth one, we can fine them, $50. We don't use fining very often. People tend to be, after a visit or two, an oops tag, they tend to start complying. But this is over years. And so we've been doing this for, over 15 years now, where, from when we started to, but also it kind of bled out into the suburban cities elsewhere too. And there's a lot of pressure, peer pressure. A lot of social marketing is based on peer pressure. There's a whole science around social marketing that's been used in the healthcare industry and other industries like, seatbelts, click it or ticket type of thing. Social marketing was used there. So we've used that same kind of concept with trying to move people towards putting their food waste into the organics container. And then you had some other questions, but I can't remember exactly what they are. And I can talk for hours, and I'll try not to. So about this stuff.
No, that was great. No, that was my main thing, is just trying to think through how, when you came in with a mandate, was there a lot of pushback, like before it came into effect, when you proposed it?
So not really, because they did it slowly over time. They did pilots, they rolled out that it was coming, then it went into effect, but it was like they had over a year before it was really going to go into effect. It was kind of in effect, but it was rolled out. So it was rolled out over time. So a lot of the naysayer or whatever, they were able to address a lot of that because they had a very clear communication strategy put into place, a clear outreach and education strategy put into place that we really acted on over time to roll it out. But I'm not saying that doesn't, every jurisdiction is going to be slightly different, as we've seen, firsthand with what's happened with, masks in the country. Not everybody likes mandates. Seattle has a very strong environmental ethic, and we played on that. I would also say, Boston has a lot of schools, and you have a lot of hospital institutions, and you can play on those institutions and try to, use them in a positive way to get messaging out to people who live in the city and participate in your programs and stuff. So I would, I'd take it one step at a time and be thoughtful and not expect that there's going to be, you do one thing and it's going to change people's behavior, because that's not how it works. But over time, you will see progress and you will see improvement. And being realistic about that and celebrate the successes and do it very publicly helps get other people on board to do it too, because they want to be part of that positive change too.
Great. And then do you have any areas in Seattle where, I mean, it sounds like, because you were mentioning seeing the contents of the trash, and that's because it's like a bin system, right? So they're sort of emptying the bins into the truck, as opposed to like our current system where we're putting out bags that are either clear or solid, depending on whether it's recycling or trash, and folks throwing them in. And I guess I'm curious, I happen to represent a part of a city where people don't use bins because there's nowhere for storage. It's the older part of town, and so bags just go out on the sidewalk, as I mentioned earlier. And so I guess I'm wondering, because if you had my part of the city, it would be hard to line 3 bins up outside, like for these 3 things. And so I'm just wondering if you guys had any like older parts of town. I know we're an older neck of the woods than you are, period. But just like whether you had any places where the physical storage of the bins like was a challenge for implementing the pilot.
Yeah, you're significantly older than we are, and we acknowledge that. We do. We have a program called the Clean Alleys program, which is in our like downtown core area where we have a lot of alleys, and for safety reasons and stuff, we've gone to a bag program. And so instead of paying for a container, you actually pay for bags. And so you get a bag and you fill it, and the bags are color coded according to the type of material that are picked up. And then we have more frequent collection in those areas. And also up on our Capitol Hill area, which is just east of the downtown area, we also have a very similar, we have that Clean Alley program. And so we've gone to that. We also, we've been piloting and trying collection for cardboard. So Denise talked about cardboard. There's a lot of, cardboard is a valuable commodity in the sense that if you can keep it clean and dry and get it to the recycling. So for those areas, flattening the cardboard, we've piloted some areas where you can slot the cardboard down into a kind of roller that then can be rolled out and it can be collected from. So we have piloted different things, and then we have an actual Clean Alleys program that I'm happy if somebody on your staff wants to talk to my manager who oversees that program, I'm happy to put them in contact, because that's been pretty successful in those older areas of the city where they're old buildings, they don't have, storage to put a container, and we're trying to keep the alleyways clear because they're used for trucks and other things, deliveries, and we don't want a lot of containers. And we've also, from a safety point of view, we don't want illegal activity being hidden by the dumpsters that would normally be out in those alleyways. So we've gone to a bag system.
Great. No, that's super helpful. And then in terms of, just so I understand, this is for both, either of you, so cardboard's very lucrative. I mean, it sounds like textiles are fairly, like, I don't know, sort of like, what are the things that in this sort of market, I mean, we can think about creating a domestic market, but fundamentally there's only gonna ever be a domestic market for things that have some value, right? So, so I'm just sort of curious from the council's perspective, so we can understand the lay of the land, like what's valuable and what's not. And then my kind of trailer question on that, when I was listening, Denise, to you talk about how folks, they think their children's toys can be recycled. I think we all have lots of trouble with people thinking those thin plastic bags can be recycled. I always think that like part of it is it's a wish that it could be recycled, right? I think frankly we just have a hard time grappling with the amount of non-recyclable material in all of our lives, and people's like way of denying that is to just put things in the recycle bin, like that will turn them into recyclable, as they obviously should be and yet are not. And so I just kind of wonder, if you guys have done anything. I mean, you mentioned the idea of holding our producers like more accountable for what happens to their materials in the long run. If you feel like you've done anything that's moved the needle towards getting people to just like use and acquire more recyclable things, because in the right, and like not pick up as much or not utilize as much these materials that are harder to reuse. So that's a twin question. Piece one, what's valuable and easy to recycle, and kind of therefore it's easier to drive a market, and any strategies or suggestions on how to get folks to move away from those non-recyclable things.
Denise, do you want to go first with your area?
Sure. So plastics seem to have become very lucrative. We have plastic because I just simply don't have storage capacity for 32 bales of number 1 or number 7 or number 5, whatever it is. But the mixed plastics we're bringing in over $200 a ton. Aluminum cans was up to, I think, 38 cents a pound around here, which is, hold on. It was like $760 a ton, which is not too shabby. Glass is, so we pay to get rid of our glass, but it's half the price of what I'm paying to have trash incinerated. Glass is, I pay $40 a ton for glass versus the $80 a ton that it goes to the incinerator. Plastics, cardboard, and just have them actually sort through their trash. We make them separate any wood products they may have, or just have them separate everything. Look at us like we have 5 heads, but if you kind of insist on it, they don't really have a choice. They can go somewhere else, and they actually tend to comply. And I think that they're more willing to do it because of the convenience of already here, and I think their minds are changing. The residents and even the commercial people that come here to use this facility, they look at it as it's doing the right thing, and we're keeping our prices low because of it. So again, I don't have anything else. On to you, Seattle.
Thanks. So we have different markets on the West Coast than you do on the East Coast, and there are certain materials that have a national market, but these are commodities. Like anything, they go up and down in value, and if you look at the values over 20 years, you'll see lots of variation. But that said, there are certain plastics that are definitely valuable, and as the price of oil goes up, the plastics become more valuable because of the fact that they can be used, if they were taken back down to the molecular structure. Metals, aluminum, of course, it's always retained its value, but metals in general tend to be good. And cardboard tends to be doing quite well right now, as Denise said, and certain types of paper, especially if it's clean paper, is doing. We ban plastic bags. We banned them from our recycling stream a number of years ago. They had very low value, and they caused huge problems at the MRF. They get into the mechanics, the sorting spinners, and they cause all kinds of problems. So we ban those, and we have drop-off options that we're trying to work with the American Chemistry Council, their WRAP program. It's WRAP program, where they have drop-off, it's collected at grocery stores and others. We aren't super successful with that, and we're trying another pilot on that one, but that's a national program we're trying to get distributed more widely to get the material where people can drop it off at their grocery store or another drop-off location. But the materials will go up and down, so you never think you look at it, a basket of goods, just like your stock portfolio or other things, you're going to vary it because you want to, the good and the bad will vary over time in different materials. And the mix of materials in the recycling has changed drastically in the last year with the onset of Amazon, which is in our backyard. We try to work behind the scenes with them to try to get them to develop, products that they're putting into the stream that will be recyclable. But in the end, I really do emphasize, Massachusetts as a state, as opposed to Boston as itself, just like New Hampshire and other states that are looking at this, having an extended producer responsibility. And we're working hard at Washington State to try to bring that to Washington State, because ultimately working upstream with the producers and getting them to take responsibility for the design of the products and the recyclability of their products, and then working downstream with those who are putting it into the markets to make sure it's clean, and bundled correctly so that it can be recycled is really critical. Glass is problematic in a lot of places. We're very blessed in Seattle to have both a glass recycling facility and then also a glass maker facility right downtown or just south of the downtown, and they're situated right next to each other. So our glass gets, sorted at our MRF, and it goes like 2-3 blocks away to a place that actually grinds it up into its sandy area, and then it gets shipped, next door to the place that makes the bottles. So we do really well in glass. Glass, though, can be problematic in a lot of ways, and it can be a contaminant for paper bales. And then you had a second question, and I forgot what that was. So.
What was my? Sorry, go ahead, Councilor Breen.
I'm just curious how you work with young people. Do you have education programs in your public schools to trying to develop these behaviors and this understanding about the importance of recycling at an early age?
We do in Seattle. There's a green schools program in Washington State, and then we take that kind of curriculum and we adapt it to Seattle, and we work really closely. They have resourced people in the Seattle School District, which, we're fortunate we have one school district that takes over the thing from a public point of view, and then we have a number of private schools. But we try to embed that into their curriculum as much as we can. But we do reach out, and we have programs that work with school kids, because I'm a true believer in planting the seed young. And they may be horrible when they're teenagers, but if you've planted the seed young, by the time they get to be 25 and they're paying their own bills, they actually may have that ethic embedded in them and actually become really good about sorting materials.
That's good.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Yeah, and the second part of my question was just, and I mean, I think you're right that the core goal has to be to get producers to stop producing things that are so unrecyclable, but I was just curious whether you felt like you'd seen a shift in materials that people were using as they receive that education about that thing that you think is recyclable really isn't, whether you feel like you see people like shifting in response to that.
So we have really started emphasizing more the reuse and the waste prevention and reuse world, and we've been fighting at the state legislation for a right to repair bill, so that people can repair their electronics and other things. So, and we see definitely an ethic, a reuse ethic in Seattle. If you go on Facebook, they're like, use less, or I can't think of the name of it right now, but where you can say, I have a couch, I don't need the couch. Or you can say, I need a couch, anyone have a couch? And they think. So we've seen that take off in the last 10, 15 years, where people definitely are using less and being more thoughtful about what they're buying. But sometimes people don't have options to buy things, and that's where the producers come in, is making sure that they're not getting products that just can't be recycled in our system.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And last question for me, actually back on composting. We were talking a bit on our end about where the compost would go. Can you talk a little bit about what it is that you guys do? Like, how much, like, are you sending it into biofuel uses? Are you using it all in your gardens, parks? Are there people who want the product you're producing? Like, what's happening upstream? Because we know it's easy to just sort of close our eyes and say we composted, but I'm just curious what you've done on that front.
So I have with me Kate Kurtz, and she is the lead expert on our landscaping and other things. So I'm going to see if she can join. I just saw her picture, so I know she's here. Kate, can you answer that question?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a really important question. For any recycled product, there has to be a market for it. at the end, right? And so the truth is that a highly urbanized area like city of Seattle, like when I visited Boston, is that you don't actually have that much soil in which to receive all of that material back. We do have a lot. You know, we have single-family homes. We do have parks that can use this, but there are clear ways in which we build compost markets. So one is in our stormwater code, and we work actually regionally. So it's all of Western Washington has a shared stormwater code. Of course, our city has its own, which we kind of like back up the Western Washington one. But essentially what you have to do for any development, you have to restore the soils that have been impacted by construction activities. With compost, you have to bring in organic matter. And that really helps with the water quality so that you don't have polluted stormwater runoff going into our surface waters. So that helps build the compost markets, but also has those water quality goals. We also have other ways that you can meet your stormwater requirements, like planting more trees or putting in green roofs, for example. Okay, so that's one way. And then as Susan mentioned in her slideshow presentation earlier too, is that we are working hard to support a circular food economy. So I think it made sense when we were only accepting yard waste into our city collected system that we were telling people to, put your tree trimmings and grass clippings in this bin and then use that back. So, we have like a whole natural yard care program in which we really emphasize soil and building soil as a foundation of our natural yard care principles. So that helps to build those soils. And that made sense. That was kind of like the whole program for many decades. But now that we have food entering into our city collected compost systems, if we really want to be sincere about supporting a circular economy, what that means is that some of those nutrients and all of those resources, the carbon and the nutrients that are encapsulated in that food waste, really need to go back to agricultural soils if we want to be truly circular. That's also where we're going to find the greatest climate benefits from using the compost, so being able to sequester carbon in the soil and also mitigate the effects of climate change. So healthy soils are more drought resistant, more erosion resistant. So this really helps us be more resilient in the face of climate change. And so we're working now at the state level, so working with Washington State University, with our State Department of Agriculture, to figure out how we can subsidize compost use on agricultural fields. So farmers love compost. It helps do great things for their soil. Usually the economics don't pencil for being able to apply compost and then getting the immediate yield benefits. So we're trying to figure out how can we make this work for our local Washington State farmers. So those are just some of the things that we do.
Got it. That's super helpful. I'll just check if Brian has any follow-up questions on that. But I also will just say that we would love to be able to put Seattle in touch with our department as we continue to think about developing this program, because all that detail is really helpful. Did you have anything else?
No, I just wanted to follow up too on the mixed digestion with the leaves and the food waste. Right now, we do over 10,000 tons of leaves at the curb for our pickup. So if we had an opportunity with the RFP to help develop somewhere where we could mix it together to get the maximum benefit, I think that's what the angle we're looking for. We have that feedstock residentially. That's not even counting any commercial in there at all. So the other thing I want to follow up real quick was the glass. The material that we sent to Casella, there was a glass facility in Rhode Island that shut down, so that caused the cost of the glass to go up. So again, goes back to the infrastructure. If the infrastructure is available or increased, the prices will be managed better, and they'll, something local to have these things. And the EPR legislation that was mentioned, we are a part of that conversation at the state level, especially the Environment Department signing on to, they're working on paint, EPR, they're working on mattresses, certainly electronics. We have a lot of headquarters for big companies in the city, and I'm sure Seattle has homes to big corporate brands that have these promises of being green. So it's a matter of holding them accountable and, what's the end of the life for their product look like? And that's the conversation that we're having now, at that level, trying to create that closed loop process, so.
That's great. Yeah, I think we're gonna want to chase that angle of this a lot more. There's only so much you can do with individual action once the product already exists. That's bad. Anything else, Councilor Braden?
No, I think this has been very informative and thank you for our colleagues across in New Hampshire and in Seattle for joining us this afternoon.
Yeah, we really appreciate you coming in, and we really do feel like this is the advantage of the hybrid hearing model, while it has its challenges. And thank you for being patient as well. We had so many questions for our team that we ran a bit longer than we thought with the first panel, so I appreciate all of you so much. And I want to thank you for coming, and thank Brian for coming and for staying, and all his team. And just say, feel free to log off. I'm going to go to public testimony next, because this is a hearing, and so we've got some folks waiting patiently to testify. But I really want to thank all the panelists so much.
Thank you.
Thank
It was
you.
our pleasure.
Thank you so much for coming. It's a good kindness. And anytime we can help you from Boston, let us know, okay?
Fantastic.
Definitely. We talk with people in Boston all the time, so thanks.
We have a few good ideas. All right, so I'm gonna go now to public testimony, and I'll just say that if you are waiting to testify, hopefully I have your name signed up here. If you're watching this on TV, you can email ccc.csit@boston.gov to quickly sign up for virtual testimony. If you're watching this after the fact, you can email ccc.csit@boston.gov to submit written testimony. So those are both options. For those who are signed up to testify, just so you know, there's a microphone over there on the floor, and you can go and stand to that. And the folks I've got here are Sheila Burkus, then Elizabeth Peterson, then Richard Swanson. So we'll go to so I'll call up Sheila first, and if you can just introduce yourself, mention your address or affiliation, and share your testimony, that would be fantastic.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Is it on? Try again.
Hello? Hello?
Sure it's on. Cora?
It's not lit up, so.
Test it one more time.
Hello? Oh, there we go.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay. Good afternoon. Sheila Burkus. I'm at 27 Chestnut Street in Boston, and I'm here on behalf of Mothers Out Front. And this is our statement. Mothers Out Front commends the City of Boston for its commitment to a zero waste plan, as well as its efforts to ensure that the waste management be considered equally across all neighborhoods. Composting our food scraps can play a significant part in that plan. By eliminating food waste, the city eliminates the methane gases released when that waste ends up in our landfills. Composting food waste and returning it to the soil creates a healthier soil. Carbon is captured, water is retained, leading to less erosion and toxic runoff. Plants grow deeper and stronger with less need for synthetic fertilizers. Composting with proper bins has been proven to significantly reduce odors, as well as the rat population currently running amok in many areas. Perhaps just as important, however, is the less measurable outcome of connecting city families with the natural world. By participating in composting, every urban household will have the opportunity to directly understand where food comes from, how returning their food scraps to soil can grow more food. Mothers Out Front urges the city to consider the end product as much as the process. We support clean compost without sludge or other contaminants, and that it must be returned to residents, schools, cities' parks, and community gardens whenever possible. With this in mind, Mothers Out Front hopes the City of Boston will add a compost and education program to the public school systems. Recognizing that composting is not only possible, but also an environmental necessity, Mothers Out Front urges the City Council and the City of Boston to join many cities throughout the country and the world who already have successful waste programs and proceed as quickly as possible with its zero waste rollout. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sheila.
Do you want a copy of this?
That'd be great, yes, if you can share a copy with Cora. And then next up will be Betsy Peterson, then Richard Swanson, and then I've also got the folks on Zoom. I know you're here, and we'll be going to you as well, so just want to register.
So I do have written testimony. I'm Betsy Peterson. I live on the back near the State House, downtown Boston. And I have written testimony, which I'll send. But what I want to do is say thank you, because it was really exciting to hear the things that you're working on and that there's going to be a pilot project already. You obviously don't need persuasion. So I'm mostly saying thank you. But what I was going to mention was just how hard it is for an individual who wants to compost to do so. The first step, as you've talked about, is education. I have learned how much I didn't know in the last year or two, that food waste is so important in methane gas, and methane is such a risk, and all those things that you all know very well. But here's what I faced when I decided I really needed to compost. I could put it in the trash, and it would go to the landfill, and I know that's bad. I could put it down to disposal, but a lot of people don't have disposals. That's not great for the wastewater system, and what's more, as people have said, it's a resource. It's a resource we need to be using to get healthier soils. The third option is to use Project Oscar. There are, in the whole city of Boston, 5 places you can take compost to Project Oscar. Luckily, I live near enough to Government Center, but I was trotting once or twice a week with my little bag of trash to drop it in the bin right back here behind us, about 50 feet away probably. And the fourth option is to use a collection service like Bootstrap. And I've just signed up for that, but it's expensive. It's $15 a week if you need a weekly pickup, which most households will. That's almost $600 a year. I do it twice every 2 weeks, and that's almost $400 a year. So that was enough to discourage me. And obviously for some families, it's going to be out of the question altogether. So thank you, thank you, thank you for starting a free program for the whole city.
Great. Thank you so much, Betsy. Next up, Richard Swanson.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you also. I'm not here really about the composting and all this, but I'm very impressed with what I hear as a resident, so I just want to congratulate you all. I look forward to seeing a lot of this. I'm from Edgerly Road. I'm one of those residents who lives in one of the mixed-use alleys, and I'm really here to ask. I came to City Council about 4 or 5 months ago. I spoke to Kennedy and to Alicia Payne in Councilor Bach's office. I've spoken to Brian in the past years ago. Is there anything that can be done about commercial trash pickup that comes in the wee hours of the morning? I have emails from literally residents in virtually every building on the street. We're all just really, really frustrated at getting woken up at 4:30, 4:45, 5 in the morning, 4 to 5 mornings a week by Waste Management. And we have pleaded with them, with the drivers, to no avail, as you probably could guess. I called Waste Management, I called the customer service line, I spoke to somebody in the Woburn office who said call the Foxborough office, and they put me in touch with somebody, I think he's actually in sales, and he said, well, you know, he said, unfortunately, you should pursue this with the City Council. I don't think we can do anything for you. Our goal is to get the trucks off the street early. And I said, well, I can understand that, but I feel like that's a business problem and not one that we should be subjected to solve for you in terms of being woken up. So I've spoken to Senator Brownsberger's office. I've contacted one of the local TV stations who's ready to do a story. We're at a point now on the street where we're just really frustrated and do whatever we can to not take no for an answer. So I do know that the city has an ordinance that says that commercial trash pickup can occur at any hour. But it's a quality of life issue for all of us who suffer through this. You know, I think everything you're doing today is about quality of life. I kind of put in the back of my mind Brian's comments about, you know, the large corporation, and maybe let's give a chance to other people, but we feel like we're up against a large corporation who doesn't really care about the residents in our case. I can prove that the trash noise, which lasts 10 to 12 minutes on a good morning, is a violation of the city noise ordinance, 1626. And I guess my question is, why aren't we enforcing that noise ordinance? Or can we possibly get the mixed-use alleys redesignated so that commercial pickup knows that they can pick up in commercial alleys and not in the mixed-use alleys so that we can sleep? I can't even open my window at night on a nice spring or fall day and feel like I might be able to sleep through the night because I know at 4:45 I'm going to hear a very loud truck 16 feet away from me. So we're all frustrated. I've sent some letters. Kennedy has the emails and stuff. What can we please get done? Do I need to contact Maura Healy? Should I take the story to TV? What can we do to stop this denial of sleep for all of us? Because it's just not fair. I know the trucks want to get off the street. I'm not trying to stop them from doing business. I'm just trying to enjoy my quality of life that I deserve as a resident too. So is there anything that can be done?
Thank you so much, Richard. And yeah, you have my commitment that we are going to continue to work on this and try to figure out what we can do about it, whether it's, that we need to pass an ordinance or we need to enforce an existing ordinance or we need to, because I think, and I think fundamentally, it's interesting. Obviously, one of the things that Seattle did was do both its commercial and residential, but in a way that put the cost burden on the commercial, right? So it sort of like brought it into the fold of the city's coordinating, but not in the fold in the sense of just asking Public Works to do 3 times as much work and whatever.
Yeah.
And so I think as we think about, the whole city's carbon footprint in this space, thinking about how we can kind of how we can hold the commercial side accountable for the way that they do this, also for the quality of what they're doing, right, from all these carbon perspectives.
Yeah.
But while asking these big businesses to be responsible for the cost of this thing that is fundamentally, a business proposition for them.
Yeah, I completely respect and understand all that. The city, residential trash pickup is amazing. They're great guys, I know them, they wave, and, they're really good about things. They clean up, and so, hats off to you on that. But the commercial truck service has just been, it's a nightmare for us. It's really a nightmare.
Yeah, no, it's not, 445 pickups, not something you should have to live with, so.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming and speaking. And now I'm going to go to public testimony on Zoom. I want to, do we have a list? Is it, sorry. Give me one moment. Oh, it's this. Okay, great, excellent. Okay, so I'll name folks off, just so people know the order that I've got. It's Judy Foster, Marjorie Hamlin, Maxine Hunter, Caroline Reeves, Jackie Royce, and Elaine Chow. And we'll go to those folks in that order if you're here. So first up, Judy Foster. Yeah, I think. Sorry, this is the challenge of the hybrid hearing is we're still figuring out how to do this piece. So. All right, while we're figuring that out, I'm gonna read into the record a letter that I need to read from a colleague who was absent today but wanted to express her interest and commitment on the hearing. This is from Councillor Ruth C. Louis-Jen, our City Councillor at Large. She wrote, "Dear Committee on City Services and Innovation Technology, I regret to inform you that I will be unable to attend the Committee on City Services and Innovation Technology hearing on Docket 0242. With the increased cost of recycling and its growing impact on municipal finances, I am particularly interested in learning and finding new policies that shift the responsibilities of recycling to the producers and manufacturers of products away from the end user. We need to innovate toward new packaging, products, and business models that keep trash out of our ecosystem. However, we must do more than recycle more or make better packaging. We must pass legislation extending producer responsibility, as it is the only proven way to create a true closed-loop system of responsibility. Also, a special thank you to the Public Works Department and their tireless efforts. Their hazardous waste drop-off days are much appreciated opportunities to dispose of electronics, paint, oil, and textiles. My staff will be attending, and I will thoroughly review the video, hearing minutes, and public testimony. Should you or any members of the public have any questions or concerns, please do not hesitate to reach out to my office directly at 617-635-4376 or at ruthc.louisjean@boston.gov. That's ruthzee.louijeune@boston.gov. Sincerely, Ruth C. Louis-Jen, Boston City Councilor at Large. So thank you to Ruth C. for sending that in. I now have an updated list of our folks who are actually here. So we've got Carolyn Reeves I'll go to first, and then to Elaine Chow, Jackie Royce, and Jenny Hamlin. So Carolyn, why don't you take it away?
Hello, everybody. I'm Carolyn Reeves, and I'm here as part of the Muddy Water Initiatives, a grassroots environmental organization that is dedicated to finding low-cost, community-accessible solutions to urban waterway pollution. At the beginning of our session today, Councilor Bach called it unsexy to have this hearing today. But for many of us, the idea of dealing with our piles of waste that we create as a Boston community is a profoundly exciting idea. The Muddy Water Initiative is a direct action organization. That is to say, we believe in empowering individuals to be able to act to better their world, and particularly the environment. Now here we have an unbelievable opportunity to make a difference. I disagree with Councilor Braden, although I am such a fan and I regard her so highly, that this is a behavior modification issue. Many of us are committed to making a difference to our environment, but we find it extremely difficult to do so. The idea that the city wants to put solutions at our fingertips is wonderful. We will take advantage of them. Many of us right away. I think your 10,000 individuals who are going to have the opportunity to compost, those slots will be taken immediately. For example, the issue of disposing of hazardous waste. We at the Muddy Water Initiative know that batteries are a huge, huge problem in leaching into our groundwater. The disposal of batteries in a responsible way is often, we're told, dispose of these wastes responsibly. But many of us just can't find the right way to do it. Those 5 days of hazardous waste collection, some of us can't make it. We have small children. We have buckets of batteries that end up in the trash. I really applaud the city of Boston for looking for ways to make it easier for us to dispose of our waste in responsible ways. The textile and clothing collection, curbside pickup, it's exciting to us. Many of us who have turned to commercial solutions for composting, like our wonderful local group, Bootstrap Compost, it brings joy to our lives to be able to deal with waste in environmentally responsible ways, but it's costly and it's not available to everybody. It's a privilege to be able to deal with our waste in responsible ways. It shouldn't be a privilege. It shouldn't be something that's available only to people with cars or money or childcare or what have you. Thank you, Boston, for thinking of ways of getting this to all of our community members, all of our environmentally responsible citizens, everybody who wants to do the right thing. So thank you so much for having this hearing today. If the Muddy Water Initiative can help in any way, we'll have our volunteers out there picking up batteries in neighborhoods. We're ready to go door to door because people want to make a difference. Don't just say it, do it. And that's what I think people will do when they're given the opportunity. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Carolyn. I'm going to go to Elaine, then Jackie, then Jerry. So Elaine?
By the way, I think Jackie is not testifying today. We're going to testify together, so thank you.
Okay, all right, great. Thank you for that update. And I think we now have Elaine Chow on.
Hi, everybody. My name is Elaine Chow. I'm a Dorchester resident, and I'm the founder of Chop Value Boston. Chop Value Boston promotes the circular economy and the way that a lot has been discussed today by collecting used chopsticks and remanufacturing them locally into high-quality home and commercial furnishings. All of our products, when sold on the East Coast, will be carbon negative products. Ours is a proven model Designed in Canada and replicated globally, we're the second franchise in the United States and the first to the East Coast. We began our recycling operation at the beginning of this month, at the beginning of March. In only 4 weeks, we've established 75 collection locations for disposable chopsticks throughout Boston, Cambridge, and Brookline, actually 78 as of today. Our partners are predominantly restaurants and a few food courts, including 2 locations at MIT. We have diverted 424 pounds from landfill in these first 4 weeks alone. Our goal is to scale to 1,200 pounds per week, and we will expand our partnerships beyond restaurants to also include caterers, colleges and universities, and private businesses to achieve this goal. Generally, restaurants have been happy to have a free service to recycle their chopsticks versus throwing them away. Those that have declined are concerned about space for collection and sanitary issues, given that as a small business, we can only pick up once or twice weekly. I would very much like to explore how the city can support innovative circular economic models such as Chop Values. I'll also say as a private resident, this hearing has been amazing to be a part of and to hear. It's so exciting to know that we are working on all of these things. Thrilled about curbside compost coming. My wish list for additional services are styrofoam and small appliances, because electronics from the city is currently all technology related. And as already mentioned today a couple times, I really do believe we need an investment in recycling education. The guidance, I think, is inadequate and in some cases contradictory. So one example, it says in the recycling guide that milk cartons are recyclable, but the directory search says to put milk cartons in the trash. So I would also love some understanding of how to properly prepare the recycling to reduce contamination and ensure it actually gets recycled. So thank you. I hope this was helpful. Please feel free to contact me if I can be of support in helping the city improve waste reduction.
Great, thank you so much, Elaine. Thank you for all that you're doing. We've got folks testifying today who are all involved in really important initiatives, so appreciate it. Next up is Marjorie Hamlin. Just wait a moment. There we go. Jerry Hamlin. Jerry, if you're able to unmute.
How's that?
Perfect.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Well, this is exactly, I am a resident of Back Bay, and I am a co-chair of the Mothers Out Front compost team. And I'm in an unstable internet situation right now, as you can tell. And so happily, Sheila Burkus and Betsy Peterson have already done our Mothers Out Front testimony, which is what I was going to do. But I do need to say that this has been a fantastic hearing. I thank you so much, Councillor Bach and Superintendent Coughlin, and then to all that information from Seattle. It's completely inspiring to us, and we can't wait to help you take it the next step. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Terry, and thank you for joining us even from the unstable location. We appreciate it. I think that is all the public testimony. I know it's all the public testimony we have in the room. I think it's all the public testimony we have signed up online. I'll just ask that if there is anybody in the Zoom waiting room who's looking to testify and hasn't had the chance, if you can raise your blue hand, and I'll just give our staff a moment to confirm that there isn't anybody else looking to testify. she was looking, so what I heard was that from her friend was that she doesn't want to speak. Okay. All right, so I think, Jackie, we're operating on the assumption that you don't want to speak, that Carolyn already spoke. So, but thank you for being here. Jackie Royce is another one of our local advocates for all things green, who I value a lot. So I think with that, we're finally just a few minutes after 5 o'clock, reaching the conclusion of this hearing. I really want to thank my co-sponsors, Councillor Michael Flaherty and Councillor Liz Braden, for co-sponsoring this docket, and all the councillors who came and asked questions, and the staff who I know were watching throughout and taking lots of notes, and our guests who joined us from Seattle and Hooksett, everybody who testified, and really a very special thanks to Superintendent Coughlin for coming and for staying the whole duration, which is, you know, above and beyond, and most importantly, just for all the work that you're doing. And I hope that the council can be like a really proactive partner with you, not just in the sense of us asking lots of questions, but in the sense of actually being helpful as we think about rolling out more, and helpful in the budget process that comes up, you know, in the coming months, and just excited to, as the City Services Chair, excited to be able to partner on these things together.
Great. Likewise, thank you so much.
Thank you. And with that, this hearing of the Boston City Council's Committee on City Services and Innovation Technology is adjourned. Thank you all. Enjoy your evenings.